I was standing beside conveyor 3 when my son-in-law smiled at my daughter and said, "I'll have you fired before lunch," with $2.8 million of my company humming under his shoes. My name is Calvin Mercer. I am 70 years old. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. That conveyor had been talking for 20 minutes. A dry bearing has a whine to it, not loud at first, more like a thin note behind the motor. Most men miss it until the whole frame starts jumping. I heard it before Brandon finished insulting me. He stood there in his pressed blue shirt. His badge said Operations Director. His shoes had never known cutting oil. Behind him stood my daughter, Megan, holding her purse with both hands. She looked tired. Brandon pointed at me with a tablet. "You're not on the schedule, Calvin," he said. "You can't just wander around the floor anymore." "I was checking conveyor 3, I said. "You were getting in the way." The men on the line went quiet. That is a sound too. When a shop goes quiet, it means something is wrong. I touched the old brass key on my ring, just once. Brandon saw it. His mouth bent a little. "You keep jingling those keys like they mean something," he said. "They open what they open," I said. He laughed through his nose. Then he turned to Megan. "By Friday, we'll have the doctor's letter cleaned up," he said. "This confusion thing is getting worse." Megan looked down. That was the first time he used that word in front of the men. Confusion. As if 46 years around press lines and grain elevators had left me unable to hear a motor eating itself. I stepped past him and hit the red stop on conveyor 3. The belt coasted down with a soft slap. Brandon's face changed. "You don't touch equipment without authorization," he said. I pointed at the drive housing. "Pull that cover." Nobody moved at first. Then Roy, the night maintenance lead, set down his coffee and got a wrench. Roy had worked for me since he was 19. He was 58 now, with bad knees and good hands. Brandon said, "Roy, don't." Roy looked at me instead. "Cover," I said. He took out 4 bolts. The housing came loose. The bearing cage had started to score. The grease was cooked black. Another hour, and that motor would have seized under load. That line fed a rush job for Dayton Packaging. One missed day would cost $16,700 in penalties, another $42,000 in overtime, maybe more if the shaft twisted. Roy held up the damaged bearing. Nobody said a word. I looked at Brandon. "I measure twice," I said. Then I set it down. That had been my rule since I was 30. Ruth used to write it on the shop calendar when I forgot birthdays. Measure twice, then set it down. A man makes fewer messes that way. Brandon stared at the bearing like it had betrayed him. Then he smiled again. "You got lucky," he said. "No," I said. "I got old." A couple men looked away because they wanted to smile. Megan did not. She said, "Dad, Brandon's just trying to help." "Is he?" Brandon stepped closer. "This is exactly what I mean," he said. "You're defensive. You're confused. You show up here with no role, no title, no purpose." I looked through the glass wall above the floor. His office sat up there. Clear glass. New desk. 4 monitors. A little brass nameplate I had not approved. Brandon Vale, Operations Director. He had ordered that nameplate for $180. I knew because Elise Hartman had sent me the receipt. Elise kept receipts like other women kept recipes. She was HR Director, payroll guard, and the only person in that building who could find a contract from 1998 in under 5 minutes. Brandon did not know that either. He pointed toward the exit. "Go home, Calvin, before this gets uglier." Megan finally touched his arm. "Brandon," she said. He shook her off gently. Not rough, just enough to show who was driving. "I'm serious," he said. "I'll have you fired before lunch." The men heard it. Roy heard it. Elise heard it from the balcony. I could see her standing there with a file in her hand. I picked up my old canvas jacket from the workbench. It still had a burn mark from a bad coupling job at Miller Feed in 2004. Ruth tried to throw it away twice. I kept fishing it out of the trash. Brandon said, "That's right, walk it off." I stopped at the yellow line. That floor had been poured in sections. I poured the first section myself in 1983. My brother and I worked under floodlights because the first press rebuild was due Monday. Ruth brought coffee at 2 in the morning. The building had been smaller then, just 4 bays, 1 lathe, 1 Bridgeport mill, and a phone that rang more often than we could answer. Now it ran 3 shifts, 86 employees, 12 service trucks. A parts room carrying $612,000 in inventory, $2.8 million in equipment under one roof. Brandon stood on all of it and called me useless. I did not tell him who signed the note on the East expansion. I did not tell him who owned the land under the employee parking lot. I did not tell him why the name Morrow Holdings appeared on every tax folder in the back office. Not yet. I just said, have Elise check the bearing order. Brandon blinked. What? SKF 3-inch pillow block. Order 2. Replace the other side too. Roy nodded. Already writing it down, he said. Brandon looked at Roy. I run operations here. Roy wiped grease on a rag. Then operate, he said. That was the closest Roy came to being rude. I walked out through the side door onto Sycamore Street. Marrow Bend, Ohio is not big enough for secrets. It sits outside Dayton, close enough for people to commute, far enough for folks to know your truck by sound. Sycamore Street runs past the old rail spur, the machine shop, Lottie's Diner, and the brick bank with the clock that loses 8 minutes every winter. I drove home slow. My hands were steady on the wheel. That worried me more than anger would have. Anger burns off. Calm stays. Ruth Mercer used to say I got quiet when I was doing math. She was right. I was adding columns already. The bearing failure, the public insult, the doctor's letter, Megan's silence, Brandon's by Friday. 4 items on the bench, none of them loose parts. At home, Ruth's kitchen was clean enough to hurt. She had been gone 3 years. I still kept her blue mug by the sink. I did not drink from it. I did not move it. Some men keep ashes. I kept a mug, a recipe box, and the cedar smell of one cabinet she claimed as hers. Her chair faced the little maple tree in the side yard. The tree had grown from a stick she planted after our 40th anniversary. She said it would outlive us both. I told her most things did. I hung my jacket on the peg. Then I saw the empty square on the wall. The photograph was gone. Ruth in the shop lobby, standing beside the memorial bench I built after she passed. She had one hand on the armrest and one hand on a tray of cookies. Every driver, machinist, vendor, and banker in Marrow Bend knew that bench. White oak, hand-rubbed, brass plate, Ruth Ann Mercer. She kept this place human. I walked back outside and drove to the shop again, not through the front. I went around to the storage bay off Maple Alley. The overhead door was half open. Inside, behind 2 broken pallet jacks and a stack of old safety signs, sat Ruth's bench. Dust already lay on the seat. The brass plate had a gray thumbprint across her name. For a minute, I could not say a word. Then I heard Brandon's voice from the other side of the racks. Just store it back here, he said. The lobby needs a more professional look. A younger man said, You sure Mr. Mercer is okay with that? Brandon laughed. Mr. Mercer doesn't make those calls anymore. I stood still. There are moments in a shop when a weld gives a tiny pop before it fails. Not a loud thing, just a warning. That was the sound inside me. I stepped around the rack. Brandon saw me and sighed. You came back? I looked at the bench. Who moved it? I did, he said. Why? Because clients don't need to sit on a shrine to your wife. The younger man froze. I knew him. Name was Kyle. New hire. 24, maybe. He stared at the floor like he wished it would open. I looked at Brandon for a long second. My wife fed half this shop, I said. And that was sweet, Brandon said. But this is a modern industrial repair company now. I walked to the bench and ran my thumb over Ruth's name. The plate was loose on one corner. Someone had dragged the bench instead of lifting it. The right leg had scraped bare. Brandon kept talking. We're rebranding. Paula thinks the lobby looks like a funeral home. Paula Vale, his mother. That woman could curdle milk by asking how fresh it was. Paula had been whispering around my daughter for years. Too much house for one old man. Too much responsibility. Too many accounts. Too many memories. Always too much when the thing was mine. I looked back at Brandon. Your mother works here now? She consults, he said. For what? Image. How much? He frowned. What? How much are we paying Paula for Image? That's not your concern. I nodded. That was an answer. I pulled the little notebook from my shirt pocket. I still carried one. Phones die. Paper does not. I wrote one line. Paula, Image Consulting, amount unknown. Brandon watched the pen move. You documenting me now? I document machines, I said. People are easier, his face tightened. Careful, Calvin. I put the notebook away. You said before lunch, I said. It's after lunch. He stepped closer. By Friday then. There it was, by Friday. He liked deadlines because he thought they made him sound powerful. I had lived by deadlines my whole life. A down press costs money by the minute. A grain elevator jam in harvest can ruin a farmer before supper. Deadlines never scared me. They only told me where to put my tools. I drove home again with Ruth's bench still in storage. That took more discipline than yelling. I wanted to bolt it back right then. I wanted to make every man in that building carry it through the front door. But I had learned something over the years. When a structure is failing, you do not kick the column. You find the load. At 6:14 that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Megan. Dad, please don't make this harder. Brandon is under pressure. He says you've been confused lately. Dr. Ellison can help us document things so we can protect you. I read it twice. Then a second message came. Nobody wants to take anything. We just need authority to help you make decisions. Authority, not help. Authority. I sat at Ruth's kitchen table with the phone in my hand. The table had 3 pale rings from coffee cups and 1 knife mark from the year Megan tried to carve a pumpkin indoors. Ruth refused to sand it out. She said a table ought to confess a little. I typed slowly. Megan, I know what Brandon said. I know what he moved. I know what he is asking you to sign. Do not sign anything until we talk. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Brandon says this is exactly the suspicious behavior Dr. Ellison warned about. I put the phone down. Dr. Ellison had seen me once in 18 months. A checkup, blood pressure, knees, cholesterol. He told me to eat less bacon. That was the whole great medical history. Now his name was being used like a crowbar. I opened the drawer beside the stove. Inside was Ruth's old cedar recipe box. It held recipe cards, church supper notes, and things that were not recipes at all. Ruth had believed important paper should hide in plain sight. She said thieves look for safes first. The little brass key on my ring fit the lock. I did not open it yet. I rested my hand on the lid. Ruth had sanded that box herself. Not well. One corner still caught a fingertip. She made it in a night class at the high school when she was 61. She came home proud as a queen with sawdust in her hair. That box held the founder's ledger, not a copy. The first one, brown cover, cracked spine, my handwriting on the first pages. Ruth's handwriting in the margins. Every loan, every payroll, every bad month, every good one. I had not opened it since after the funeral. I took my hand off the lid. Not because I was afraid of the papers, because I knew once I opened it, I would stop being a father first. I would become the man who built Mercer Industrial Repair from a rented bay and a $3,000 lathe. Those are not the same man. At 7:32, my landline rang. Only 4 people used that number. Lottie from the diner, Roy from the shop, Elise from HR, and Mr. Sutter, my attorney in Dayton, who had kept my papers clean for 21 years. It was Elise. Calvin, she said. Her voice was low. Are you alone? Yes. I pulled the payroll queue like you taught me. I looked at the cedar box. And? There's an executive advance scheduled for Friday. How much? $38,000. I closed my eyes once. Approved by who? Brandon. Payable to? Himself. I rubbed my thumb along the table edge. What reason? There was a pause. Retention bonus against future performance compensation. I almost smiled. That phrase had Brandon all over it. A man says retention bonus when he wants theft to wear a tie. Elise kept going. There's more. He uploaded a promotion letter 3 weeks ago. For himself? Yes. It says Senior Vice President of Operations, effective Monday. We don't have Senior Vice Presidents. I know. Who signed it? Another pause. You did. I looked down at my right hand. Old scar across the knuckle. Bent little finger. A grip built from pipe wrenches and stubborn bolts. I didn't sign any promotion letter, I said. I know that too, Elise said. The room became very still. Not quiet. Still. There is a difference. Elise said, Calvin, the signature is scanned. From what? I'm checking. Don't alert him. I haven't. Who else knows? Only me. Keep it that way. She breathed out. He's been asking me about ownership records. When? Yesterday. He asked why Morrow Holdings appears in the corporate file. I looked at Ruth's cedar box again. There was that name, Morrow Holdings. A name Brandon had seen but not understood. Ruth picked it because her mother's maiden name was Morrow. She said Mercer was for the sign out front. Morrow was for the lockbox. I laughed at her then. I am not laughing now. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him old companies have old folders. Good. He also asked whether an HR incapacity clause could suspend founder privileges. I leaned back. There it was. Not a loose bolt. A cracked beam. Did he use those words? Yes. Founder privileges? Yes. I looked toward Ruth's empty chair. Brandon was not just trying to embarrass me. He was building a file. Confusion. Doctor. Authority. Incapacity. Founder privileges. Those words do not wander into a man's mouth by accident. Calvin, Elise said, do you want me to call Sutter? No, I said. I'll call him. When? I looked at the clock over the stove. Ruth bought it at a yard sale for $6. It had strawberries painted on it. I hated that clock for 20 years. Now I wound it every Sunday. In the morning, I said. Elise was quiet. Then she said, there's one more thing. I waited. Paula Vale is on the vendor list. For image consulting. Yes. How much? $8,500 a month. I wrote it down. Since when? April. That made 4 payments. $34,000. For image. I did not curse. Ruth never liked it in the house. I said, print everything. I already did. 2 copies. Already done. That was Elise. A receipts keeper. Go home, I said. I'm still here. I know. Go home. She softened a little. Calvin, I'm sorry about Ruth's bench. I looked at the empty place where that lobby photograph had been. He moved the wrong thing, I said. After we hung up, I sat for a long time. Then I unlocked the cedar box. The key turned stiff. The lid lifted with that dry wooden creak Ruth loved. On top were recipe cards tied with red string. Meatloaf, lemon bars, church potatoes. Under those was a folded envelope with my name on it. Calvin. Ruth's handwriting. I did not open the envelope. Not yet. Under it sat the ledger. I laid both hands on the cover. I could feel grit in the cracks. Shop dirt from 40 years ago, maybe. Or dust from our first office, where Ruth kept payroll in a cigar box and paid herself last. The phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. I let it ring out. A voicemail popped up. I played it on speaker. A woman's voice filled the kitchen. Mr. Mercer, this is Paula Vale. I think it would be wise for us to sit down tomorrow at Lottie's. Megan is concerned. Brandon is concerned. We all are. Nobody wants to embarrass you, but if you force this, we may need to discuss guardianship options. She paused. Then she added softer, You've had a good run, Calvin. Let the younger people protect what's left. What's left? I looked at the ledger under my hands. The shop was valued at $4.6 million on the last appraisal. The Sycamore Street land was worth $940,000. The service fleet carried another $780,000. The parts inventory sat over $600,000. The operating account had $1,200,000 after payroll reserve. What's left? I saved the voicemail. Then I placed Ruth's envelope back on top of the ledger. I locked the cedar box again. I set the brass key beside my plate. At 8:51, I called Lottie's diner. Lottie herself answered. Lottie's. It's Calvin. Well, I know that, she said. You want pie? Back booth tomorrow. 9. For how many? 5. Trouble? Breakfast. She snorted. That means trouble. Coffee, too. You always get coffee. Then you're ready. I hung up and wrote 5 names in my notebook. Calvin Mercer. Megan Mercer Vale. Brandon Vale. Paula Vale. Dennis Vale. Dennis was Brandon's father. He had owned a steakhouse near Dayton Mall that failed twice under 2 different names. First Vale House Grill, then Copper Rail. Same freezer, same unpaid taxes, same story with a new sign. I had loaned him $25,000 once. Ruth told me not to. He paid back $6,000 and called the rest a misunderstanding. Now Elise had found $38,000 more moving toward Brandon. Paula had $34,000 in image money, and Megan was texting me about protection. I slept badly that night, not because I was scared, because I was sad. There is a difference there too. By 7 in the morning, I was dressed in clean jeans, brown boots, and the gray work shirt Ruth always said made me look less tired. I put the brass key back on my ring. I put the notebook in my pocket. Then I drove down Sycamore Street toward Lottie's. Mercer Industrial sat to my left as I passed. The sign out front caught the sun. Brandon had changed the logo last month, sharper letters, black and silver, very modern. He had billed the company $12,300 for it. Ruth's bench was still missing from the lobby window. I kept driving. Lottie's diner sat 2 blocks down, tucked between the bank and a closed hardware store. Half of Marrow Bend learned its news in that back booth. Contractors talked bids there, farmers talked equipment, bankers pretended not to listen. When I walked in, Lottie gave me the look she saved for men pretending they were fine. "Back booth," she said. "Thank you." "Coffee?" "Yes." "Pie?" "It's morning." "That never stopped you before." "Just coffee." She studied me. "Then it really is trouble." I sat facing the door. That is an old habit from years of meeting men who owed money and men who wanted it. Brandon arrived first, wearing a tan sport coat. Nobody wears a sport coat to Lottie's unless they plan to lie. Paula came in behind him, silver hair, white blouse, gold necklace. She carried a folder like she was entering court. Dennis followed last, red-faced and breathing hard from the walk across the parking lot. Megan came in with them. My daughter did not meet my eyes. That hurt more than Brandon's threat. They slid into the booth. Brandon smiled at me. "Glad you came, Calvin." "I invited you." His smile twitched. Paula patted Megan's hand. "We're here because we care." Lottie poured coffee. She looked at Paula's folder, then at me. "You folks need menus?" "No," Paula said. Lottie looked at me. "Menus," I said. Paula blinked. Lottie set 5 menus down with force. Brandon leaned forward. "Calvin, this can be simple." "Most things can." "You stop coming to the shop unannounced. You let HR formalize your retirement status. You sign a limited authority document so Megan can help with finances." Megan whispered, "It's not like that." I looked at her. "What is it like?" She swallowed. "Dad, you scared people yesterday." I stopped a bad bearing. "You overstepped." "Who told you that?" She looked at Brandon. There was the answer. Paula opened her folder. "Calvin, aging is not a moral failure." "No," I said, "it isn't. We all lose capacity." "Some do." She smiled like I had agreed to lose mine. "Dr. Ellison is willing to evaluate you." "For what?" "Decision-making." "What decision worried you?" Brandon jumped in. "The shop floor incident." "The one that saved a motor?" He frowned. "The one that showed poor boundaries." I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot, but I did not show it. "Brandon," I said, "how much is a 3-inch pillow block bearing?" He stared. "What?" "How much?" "That's not relevant." "It was relevant yesterday." Dennis shifted beside Paula. I looked at him. "Dennis, how much did Copper Rail owe when it closed?" His face went flat. Paula said, "That is not appropriate. Neither is guardianship over breakfast." Megan's eyes lifted to mine. Brandon put one hand on the table. "This is the paranoia we're talking about." "Paranoia," I said. That word sat there with confusion. 2 labels, same toolbox. Paula said, "You're proving our point." I opened my notebook. Brandon's eyes dropped to it. "What's that?" "Things I measure." He laughed once. "See, this is obsessive. I wrote that down too. Obsessive." Paula watched the pen. Her voice changed a little. "Calvin, nobody is attacking you. You moved Ruth's bench." The table went quiet. Megan looked at Brandon. "You moved Mom's bench?" Brandon's jaw tightened. It was a lobby decision. Megan's face changed. Just a little. Paula said, "A business cannot be a mausoleum." I looked at her. "Ruth signed payroll when we had $12 left." Paula folded her hands. "And that is lovely history." "No," I said, "that is load-bearing." Brandon's mouth opened, then closed. He did not have a short answer for that, because men like Brandon do not know the weight of a woman who keeps a company alive from a card table and a cigar box. Paula recovered first. "Sentiment cannot run operations." "No," I said, "neither can vanity." Her eyes sharpened. "Excuse me?" I nodded at her folder. "You brought paper. Use it." She liked that. I could see it. She thought I had stepped into the snare because old men get tired and polite at the wrong time. She opened the folder and slid out 3 sheets clipped together. "This is a proposed family support agreement," she said. "Family support," I said. "It gives Megan limited authority." "For what?" "For your appointments, banking coordination, and business communication." "Business communication with who?" "With Mercer Industrial," Brandon said. I looked at Megan. "Did you read it?" She rubbed her thumb against her ring. Brandon explained it. "That's not what I asked." "Dad." "Did you read it?" Her face went red. "Not all of it." Dennis cleared his throat. "Calvin, don't make her feel small." I turned to him. "You still owe me $19,000. His face dropped so fast it almost made me sorry. "Almost." Paula snapped. "That loan was between men. It was between my checkbook and your failed freezer." Brandon leaned in. "Enough." "That's what I said to myself yesterday." He froze for half a beat. That was the first good sound all morning. Lottie passed near the booth carrying 2 plates for the counter. She slowed just enough to hear. Everybody in Lottie's knew how to slow down without admitting it. A farmer in a seed cap looked into his coffee. 2 linemen at the window went quiet. That back booth had become a shop floor. Paula pushed the papers closer to me. "Sign this, Calvin. Then we can keep this private." Private. That word always means somebody wants darkness. I picked up the top page and read the first paragraph. The print was clean. The words were not. It said Megan could request medical records. It said she could communicate with company personnel. It said she could review accounts related to my welfare. Then I found the line they had hoped I would miss. It said any founder, advisor, or retired officer showing diminished judgment could be temporarily restricted from company premises by written notice from operations leadership. I looked at Brandon. He smiled with only his mouth. "It protects everyone." From me? From confusion. Confusion. There it was again. They had sharpened that word until they thought it could cut steel. I folded the paper once and set it down. "Who wrote this?" Paula said. "Our attorney reviewed it." "What attorney?" "Family counsel." "What name?" She looked at Brandon. He said, "You don't need to know that yet." I drank my coffee. It had cooled enough. "Then I don't need to sign it." Megan looked tired. "Dad, please." I hated the sound of that. I had heard her say please when she was 7 and wanted me to fix a broken dollhouse door. I had heard it when she was 16 and needed me to teach her how to parallel park behind the post office. This please had been handed to her by somebody else. So I softened my voice. "Megan, ask him one question." She stared at me. "What?" "Ask Brandon what company asset he pledged." Brandon's fingers tightened on his cup. Paula said, "This is absurd." I kept my eyes on my daughter. "Ask him." Megan turned slowly. "What is he talking about?" Brandon laughed under his breath. "He doesn't know." "That's not an answer," I said. Dennis shifted again. His knee knocked the table. Coffee trembled in Paula's cup. I noticed that. A man can learn plenty from shaking coffee. It tells you whose hand reached for the wrong valve. Megan's voice got smaller. "Brandon," he touched her wrist. "Baby, don't let him do this." "Do what?" "Divide us." I nearly laughed. He had taken my daughter's trust, folded it around his debt, and called me division. Paula gathered the papers. "We should stop." "No," Brandon said. "We're not stopping." He looked at me like he had decided to act strong in front of witnesses. That is a common mistake. Witnesses remember. "You want facts?" he said. "Fine. You don't have an active employment role. You're retired. You wander in, scare staff, and interfere with procedures. I have authority to restrict access. To the shop I built, to the business I run." The diner went quiet enough that I heard the grill hiss from the kitchen. I nodded once. "That's a clean statement." "What does that mean?" "It means I heard it." He pointed toward the papers. "You can sign today, or HR can handle it Friday." Friday. He kept coming back to that day like it belonged to him. He did not know Friday was already sitting in Elise's printer, 2 copies deep. I put $6 on the table for coffee. Lottie would argue later. I stood up. Megan reached for my sleeve. "Dad, don't leave mad." "I'm not mad." Brandon smirked. "Then what are you?" I looked at him. "Finished measuring." That took the smirk off him for a breath. Paula slid out of the booth. Calvin, if you walk away, we'll proceed without your cooperation. I know. Then you understand the consequence. I understand more than you think. I walked out of Lottie's with their papers still on the table. I did not take them. That mattered. If a man wants to trap you with paper, let him keep handling it. Fingerprints are not just for police shows. Habits leave prints too. Outside, Sycamore Street was bright and ordinary. A delivery truck backed into the bank lot. Somebody's dog barked behind the closed hardware store. Marrow Bend kept moving because small towns do that. A family can be cracking at the beam and the stoplight still turns green. I sat in my truck and did not start it. My hands rested on the wheel. They looked old to me in that light. The knuckles were thick. The nails were cut too short. The scar by my thumb had gone white years ago. I thought about Ruth then, not the sad parts. I thought about her standing in the first shop with a pencil behind her ear, telling a supplier we would pay $4,800 by Thursday and not a penny of late fee besides. She was 5'4" and could make a grown salesman apologize to a clipboard. The phone buzzed. Elise. Calvin, she said. He just emailed me. What did he say? He wants a draft notice prepared. For me? Yes. Access restriction pending medical documentation. Who did he copy? Megan, Paula, Dennis. I looked back through the diner window. Brandon was still in the booth. He had his phone in his hand. What else? I asked. He marked it urgent. Of course he did. Calvin, there's an attachment. What is it? A physician summary. My chest tightened once. From Dr. Ellison? It has his letterhead. Read it. She hesitated. It says you have shown increasing confusion, workplace agitation, and impaired judgment regarding financial and operational matters. Date? Yesterday. I didn't see Dr. Ellison yesterday. I know. Signature? It's digital. Send it to Sutter. I already sent it to your secure folder. Not to Sutter yet. Good. Hold 1 minute. I started the truck and pulled away from Lottie's. I drove 2 blocks to the public library parking lot, where nobody would lean in my window and ask about a radiator hose. I parked under a maple tree. Now listen, I said, do not prepare the notice. He's my direct executive supervisor on paper. On paper, what authority does he have over owner access? That depends on the ownership file. Have you opened the file? I can see the cabinet entry. I haven't opened the sealed PDF. Why not? It requires owner passcode. I looked at the brass key hanging from my ignition ring. Beside it was a small black fob Ruth had always called ugly. It was ugly. It also held the rotating code for documents that mattered. Elise, I said, write this down. I'm ready. I gave her the passcode phrase. Not the whole thing, just the first part. She drew a sharp breath. That opened the prompt. Second part is Ruth's birthday. I don't know it. You do. No, I don't. You handled her life insurance. There was a pause. Then keys clicked. Oh, Elise said. That was all. A small word, but it carried weight. I heard more clicking, then nothing. Elise? I'm looking at it. Read only the title. Ownership and Control Ledger, Morrow Holdings, Mercer Industrial Repair. I closed my eyes. Ruth's lockbox name had just come alive inside the company system, quietly, correctly, without Brandon in the room. Do not print that yet, I said. Understood. Who can see you opened it? Only admin audit. That routes to me. Good. She lowered her voice. Calvin, your name is on the owner page. I know. 100%. I know that too. I had always wondered. Most people did. Brandon doesn't know. No. He asked the wrong question. He always does. A car pulled in beside me. An old man got out carrying 3 library books and a cane. Life kept being normal around a thing that was not normal at all. Elise said, "There's a conflict disclosure tab. Open it." More clicking. Then she went quiet again. Elise? Brandon filed a disclosure 2 years ago, she said. It says no outside financial obligations related to company vendors, customers, or secured compensation. Print that. I will. What else? There's a benefits pledge policy. It forbids assigning future bonuses or performance compensation to private lenders without owner approval. Print that too. Calvin, why would that be in the policy? Because I knew men who borrowed against tomorrow. You wrote this? Ruth did. That was true. I had seen too many shop owners get squeezed by side loans and silent partners. Ruth wrote the policy after a vendor in Brookville lost a press break to a cousin's debt. She said, family trouble always looks smaller before it has your signature. Elise's voice changed. There's a lender verification email in Brandon's personnel upload. What lender? Gem City Capital. I did not know that name. I wrote it down. Amount? I asked. It references $486,000. There it was. The number had shape now. I sat very still. Against what? I asked. Future executive compensation and anticipated equity participation. I let that sentence settle. Anticipated equity participation. He had promised a future slice of a company he did not own, using a promotion I had not signed and bonuses he had not earned. Who uploaded it? Brandon. When? Last month. Attached to the promotion letter? Yes. Print everything except owner page. Why not the owner page? Because Brandon is sniffing around the cabinet. If he smells the truth now, he'll change tactics. What do you want me to do? I looked through the windshield at the library doors. Ruth used to check out mystery novels there and return them with notes tucked inside for me. She said I never read enough books where men got punished for lying. Pull the visitor logs from yesterday, I said. Pull vendor payment history for Paula Vale. Pull all payroll changes entered by Brandon. That's a lot. Machines fail in systems. I'll have it. And Elise? Yes? If he comes to your office, you are busy with benefits enrollment. It's July. Then you're very behind. She laughed once, short and nervous. Got it. I hung up and called Mr. Sutter in Dayton. He answered on the third ring. His voice sounded like paper and black coffee. Calvin. Morning, Arnold. You calling socially? No. I assumed. I told him enough. Not all. A lawyer needs clean parts, not a junk drawer. He did not interrupt until I said Gem City Capital. Then he said, spell that. I did. He typed for a moment. Small private lender, commercial paper, aggressive collections. Do we know them? No, but I can. Do that. Has Brandon signed anything on behalf of Mercer? Looks like he used a fake promotion letter and future compensation. Forgery, maybe. Medical angle? Letterhead from Ellison. I never saw him. Sutter went quiet. Arnold? I want the original documents preserved. Do not confront the doctor yet. I wasn't planning to. Good. People who use medical paper to take control of assets are usually not improvising. That sentence bothered me because it sounded like experience. What do you need? I asked. Authority to send preservation letters. You have it. To the lender, Dr. Brandon, Paula, Dennis, and any counsel that drafted that family agreement. You have it. Company counsel? Loop them when it's time. Calvin, does Brandon know you own it? No. Sutter breathed through his nose. Then keep it that way until we can box the documents. That was my thought. You still have the founder's ledger? Yes. Where? Ruth's cedar box. He softened. Good woman, Ruth. The best. Bring it to the shop Friday. Not before? Not before. If the public meeting is already scheduled, let him create the record. He said HR would handle me Friday. Then HR handles him Friday. That was Sutter. He could make a sentence sound like a door locking. After I hung up, I drove home. I did not go to the shop. That was the part that felt like losing. I knew Brandon would call it compliance. He would tell Megan I had backed down because his pressure worked. He would walk past Ruth's empty bench spot and feel taller. Sometimes you let a man misread silence. It makes him walk farther out on the plank. At home, I made myself toast and did not eat it. I laid Ruth's cedar box on the kitchen table. The room smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. I unlocked the brass latch. This time I opened her envelope. The paper inside was folded once. Ruth had written in blue ink, careful but not fancy. Her hand had gotten smaller near the end, but the letters still knew where they were going. Calvin, if you are reading this because someone you love is asking you to ignore what you know, do not do it. I sat down. I had to. There are sentences that take the strength out of your knees without raising their voice. I kept reading. We built Mercer with work, not wishes. We paid vendors before vacations. We paid payroll before pride. We helped family when we could, but helping is not the same as handing them the keys. If Megan is scared, love her. If someone is using her fear, stop them. Do not let affection become legal blindness. Measure twice, then set it down. I read that last line 3 times. Measure twice, then set it down. She had stolen my phrase and made it better. That was Ruth all over. She could take a thing I said in a shop and make it mean more than steal. Under the note was the old ledger. I opened to the first page. April 1983. Rent, $600. Lathe down payment, $3,000. Used compressor, $475. First job, cracked press shaft, $920. Ruth had written next to it, paid light bill first. I turned pages. There was the second loan on our house for $18,000. The month I sold my fishing boat for $2,100 to cover payroll. The winter Ruth pawned her mother's bracelet for $800 and bought it back 5 months later for $940. She never told Megan that. She barely told me. There was the first Sycamore Street land payment, $42,000. The forklift auction, $11,600. The first service truck, $9,800. Then the year we cleared $100,000 in profit, and Ruth circled the number so hard the pen almost tore through. I kept turning until I reached the ownership section we added much later. Typed pages lived between handwritten ones. Ruth hated that, but Sutter insisted. Morrow Holdings, Mercer Industrial Repair, Calvin Mercer, sole member, founder rights retained, transfer restrictions, incapacity provisions requiring 2 independent physicians, owner council notice, and board certification. Board certification. That meant Elise. That meant Sutter. That meant not Brandon with a tan sport coat and a fake letter. I pulled one page halfway out, then stopped. I was not ready to separate it from the book. Ruth had made the ledger whole. I would keep it whole until the table where it mattered. My phone buzzed again. Megan. Dad, why did you bring up money at breakfast? Brandon says you humiliated his parents. I typed back. Megan, did Brandon tell you about Gem City Capital? The answer did not come right away. Then 3 dots. No. What is that? Ask him. This time the 3 dots stayed longer. He says you're trying to scare me. I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred. I typed one more line. I am trying to slow you down before you sign away your right to ask questions. She did not answer. At 1:17, Elise called again. He came to my office, she said. Brandon? Yes. What did he want? The access notice. And? I told him benefits enrollment is behind. I almost smiled. How did he take that? He said I work for him. You do not. I know that today more clearly than yesterday. What happened then? He asked whether I had reviewed the Morrow file. My hand stopped on the ledger. What did you say? I asked which one. Good. He said the old holding company folder. And? I said old companies have old folders. You used that twice. It worked twice. Did he leave? After he told me my job depends on understanding leadership. Document it. Already done. What did you find? She shuffled paper. Payroll changes entered by Brandon in the last 6 months. Salary adjustment for himself from $142,000 to $189,000, effective Monday, but entered last Friday. Approved by himself, using delegated operations authority. Not valid for executive compensation. I know. I printed the policy. What else? Vehicle allowance, $1,200 a month. He already has a company truck. Yes? What else? Paula Vale Consulting, $8,500 monthly. Scope says executive image, lobby modernization, community perception, family transition messaging. Family transition messaging. That one had Paula's fingerprints all over it. Anything for Dennis? I asked. Not as a vendor, but there are reimbursements to Brandon. Dinner meetings at Copper Rail's old supplier contacts. $3,200 total. Copper Rail is closed. Yes. I wrote each amount, $189,000, $1,200 monthly, 8,500. 3,200. The numbers made a trail. Not a clean road yet, but a trail. Elise said, "There's one more document. Read the title. Succession Communications Draft." Who wrote it? Paula's vendor account uploaded it. Open it. She took a breath. It's a memo template. Announcement of Calvin Mercer's reduced role due to health concerns. Interim operational authority assumed by Brandon Vale. My kitchen seemed to shrink around me. Date? Blank. Audience? All staff. Print it. I did. Does it mention Megan? Yes, it says with full family support. Full family support. That meant my daughter's name was the ribbon on the box. I looked at Ruth's note on the table. If Megan is scared, love her. If someone is using her fear, stop them. Calvin, Elise said, I'm here. What do we do with this? We keep measuring. And Friday? Friday they put it on the table. After we hung up, I put Ruth's note back in the envelope but left the ledger open. I read for another hour, not because I needed facts, but because I needed memory with numbers on it. A man forgets some pain after 40 years. Paper does not. Paper remembered when Ruth drove payroll checks to a crew in Xenia during an ice storm because 5 families needed groceries. Paper remembered when I worked 36 hours straight on a cereal plant gearbox and came home smelling like oil and burnt dust. Paper remembered when Megan was 10 and slept on 2 shop coats in the office because Ruth and I were both too tired to drive home. That company was not an account. It was years turned into walls. At 5:20, Megan came to the house. She did not knock. She still had her key. Ruth insisted Megan keep one even after she married Brandon. This house is never closed to our child, she had said. Megan stepped into the kitchen and saw the cedar box. Then she saw the ledger. What is that? She asked. History. She closed the door behind her. Brandon says you're calling lawyers. I called my lawyer. Why? Because he is using papers. She wrapped her arms around herself. He says you're escalating. He emailed HR a medical letter today. Her eyes moved. What medical letter? One that says I'm confused. She shook her head. No. He said Dr. Ellison just had concerns. Did you see it? No. Did you talk to Dr. Ellison? No. Then who told you? She looked down. I did not press. She knew the answer. I turned the ledger toward her. Sit down. Dad, I don't want to fight. Neither do I. She sat in Ruth's chair. That hurt for a second, then it helped. I slid the first page of Ruth's note across the table. Read it. Megan looked scared of the paper. Is this Mom's? Yes. Her fingers touched the edge like it might break. She read silently. Her lips moved once at the word affection, then her eyes filled. She put one hand over her mouth. I didn't know she wrote this, she said. Neither did I until today. Megan wiped under one eye. Brandon said you'd try to make this about Mom. It is about Mom. That's not fair. No, it's true. She pushed the paper back. He's under pressure. How much? What? How much pressure? She swallowed. His parents lost more than they said. How much more? I don't know. $486,000? She stared at me. There it was. She had heard that number somewhere. Where did you hear it? I asked. She stood up too fast. The chair scraped. I shouldn't have come. Megan. No, Dad, I can't be between you. You already are. She looked at me then, and for the first time since Ruth's funeral, I saw my little girl under the married woman's fear. Brandon said it was temporary, she whispered. What was temporary? The lender, the bonus thing. He said once you officially stepped back, everything would be normal. I kept my voice level. Did you sign anything? No. Did you promise to? He said we'd talk Friday. Friday again. That day was getting crowded. I closed the ledger. Listen carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not call Paula. Do not warn Brandon about this conversation. He's my husband. You are my daughter. That's not fair either. I know. She picked up her purse. What happens Friday? I measured twice. Her face twisted. Dad. Then I set it down. She stood there for a moment, waiting for me to explain more. I did not. Some information protects people better when it stays in the toolbox until the right bolt is in reach. Megan left with Ruth's note still on the table between us. I watched her car back out of the drive. She sat at the curb for nearly a minute before she pulled away. That told me something. She was not free yet, but she had stopped moving only in Brandon's direction. At 7 that night, Sutter called back. Gem City Capital responded informally, he said. That was fast. They know my letterhead. What did they say? They have a personal guarantee from Brandon Vale and Dennis Vale. They also claim documentation of anticipated executive compensation from Mercer Industrial. Claim? Yes, I asked them to preserve the file. Did they mention equity? They did. How much? 20% future participation, contingent on succession. I looked at the cedar box. 20% of my company. Not his salary, not his bonus, not even his job. He had sold a shadow of my life to cover his parents' collapse. Sutter continued. They also referenced a board transition by Friday. I leaned back. There is no board transition. I know. Who told them? Brandon. Likely. Maybe Paula. We'll know when they produce. What's our next move? Friday managers meeting. You attend. Elise reads the policies and ownership excerpt only after Brandon puts your access or transition on record. He will. I agree. Do I speak? Very little. That suits me. Bring the ledger. Bring Ruth's note if you can bear it. I looked at her envelope. I can bear it, I said. Sutter was quiet for a moment. Calvin, once this starts, Megan may hear things she cannot unhear. She needs to. Yes, but remember what Ruth wrote. I smiled without meaning to. You know Ruth wrote something? Calvin, she made me draft half those protections. Of course she wrote something. After that call, I packed the ledger in a canvas tool bag instead of a briefcase. That may sound small, but it mattered to me. I had carried bearings in that bag. I had carried dial indicators, pullers, seal kits, and one cracked impeller from a feed mill outside Troy. Now I put paper in it. Paper can be a tool too. I slept better that night. Not well, better. Friday morning came gray over Marrow Bend. Rain threatened but did not fall. I shaved slow. I wore the gray work shirt again, clean jeans, and the same brown boots. I put Ruth's envelope inside the ledger and the ledger inside the canvas bag. Before I left, I stopped by the hallway table and looked at our wedding picture. Ruth was smiling like she had just won an argument. She probably had. You were right, I said. Then I drove to Mercer Industrial Repair. The parking lot was nearly full when I got there. First shift was already in. The service truck sat in a row by the east fence, white and blue with the black and silver logo Brandon had bought for $12,300. It still looked wrong to me, too slick, like a wrench drawn by someone who had never busted a knuckle. Inside, the lobby smelled like floor polish and coffee. Ruth's bench spot was still empty. The wall where her photograph had hung looked pale around the edges because sunlight ages paint and memory does not. A young receptionist named Kara looked up. Her eyes widened. Mr. Mercer. Morning, Kara. Mr. Vale said you weren't expected. I know. She glanced toward the hallway. There's a manager's meeting at 8. That's why I'm here. Her hand hovered near the phone. I set the canvas bag gently on the floor beside me. You don't need to call him. She called him anyway. I did not blame her. People with rent follow procedures. Her voice shook a little. Mr. Vale, Mr. Mercer is in the lobby. I could hear Brandon through the handset, not the words, just the tone. Hard and pleased. Kara hung up. He said you can wait. I'll stand. I stood beside the empty bench space for 7 minutes. Men walked through and tried not to stare. A machinist named Ted gave me a small nod. A parts runner looked at my bag and then away. The building hummed around us. Compressor kick, forklift reverse beep, phones, footsteps, work. Then Brandon came down the hall. He had dressed for victory, navy suit, no tie, polished shoes too thin for a shop. Megan followed behind him, pale and quiet. Paula was with them too, carrying the same folder from Lottie's. Dennis was not there. That told me he was either too ashamed or too useful somewhere else. Brandon stopped 6 feet from me. Calvin. Brandon, you shouldn't be here. It's Friday. His eyes flicked toward the receptionist, then to 2 supervisors near the hallway. Yes, he said, it is. Paula's mouth made a small, satisfied line. Megan would not look at the empty wall. Brandon lowered his voice. You can make this dignified. I plan to. Good. The managers are assembled. Then don't keep them waiting. He smiled, but his cheeks had no color. I picked up the canvas tool bag. It was heavier than paper should be. Or maybe that was just the years inside it. We walked down the hall toward the glass conference room. Through the walls, I could see 15 people at the table and along the back, shop supervisors, dispatch, accounting, sales, fleet. Elise stood at the far end with a binder against her chest. She saw the canvas bag in my hand. She did not smile. That was good. This was not a smiling morning. Brandon opened the conference room door like he owned the hinges. Everyone, he said, thank you for making time. No one thanked him back. I stepped inside and took the chair nearest the door. That was where I always sat when I did not plan to stay long. The canvas bag went on the floor by my boot. Megan stood near the wall, not at the table. Paula chose a chair beside Brandon and laid her folder down square. Elise stayed at the far end. Brandon looked at my bag. Calvin, you can put that in my office. It's fine here. This is an operations meeting. I know. His smile tightened. Then let's keep it professional. I looked around the room. Ted from machining, Ray from fleet, Carla from accounting, Vince from dispatch. 2 project managers, 3 shop supervisors, people who had eaten cold pizza beside busted motors at midnight, people who knew what work smelled like. Brandon did not look at them the same way. He looked at them like chairs he had purchased. He clicked a remote. The wall screen lit up with a slide that said Leadership Continuity. Under it was the new logo. That slick wrench again. He said, We've had a difficult week. Nobody moved. Some of you have seen tension around the company. Some of you have heard things that were not meant for the floor. His eyes came to me. I folded my hands. He kept going. Mercer Industrial is entering a new phase. We have strong contracts, a larger regional footprint, and obligations that require clear leadership. Carla glanced at Elise. Elise did not blink. Brandon clicked to the next slide. It showed a photo of me from 6 years earlier, cropped from a chamber dinner. I had Ruth beside me in the original. He had cut her out. That was the first time my hand wanted to move. It did not. The slide said Founder Transition. Calvin built something meaningful, Brandon said. No one disputes that. There it was. Built something meaningful. Not built the company. Not carried the notes. Not signed the loans. Not put his house under a bank's thumb when payroll was due. Just something meaningful, like a birdhouse. He looked at me again. But all companies mature. All founders face a moment when care becomes risk. Ted shifted in his chair. Brandon held up one page. We have received professional concern about Calvin's capacity to participate in active company matters. Elise said, From whom? Brandon did not like that. Elise, we'll get to HR procedure. I asked from whom? Medical correspondence. Name the physician. He set the page down. Dr. Ellison. I looked at Megan. Her face went still. Elise opened her binder. For the record, HR has no verified medical restriction on Calvin Mercer. Brandon laughed once. For the record? Yes. This is not a hearing. Then stop using employment language. That put a crack in the room. Brandon's jaw moved. Fine. We'll use business language. He clicked again. The next slide said temporary access limitation. He said, effective today, Calvin's facility access will be limited to escorted visits. His advisory role will be suspended pending review. He will retain dignity and family support. I said nothing. You have to understand something about a shop room. Men and women who work around pressure lines can smell when a fitting is about to let go. They may not know the name for it. They just lean back a step. That room leaned back. Ray said, Who approved that? Brandon turned. Executive operations. Ray said, That you? Yes. Ray nodded once. That's what I thought. Paula leaned forward. This isn't personal, it's protection. I looked at her then. She looked ready for a town luncheon. Pearls, cream jacket, hair set hard enough to survive weather. Her folder had colored tabs, protection. That word had been walking around me all week wearing different shoes. Brandon said, Megan supports this. Megan's head came up. He did not look at her. As Calvin's daughter, she understands the need for a calm transition. Elise said, Megan is not an officer of Mercer Industrial. Paula said, she's family. Elise looked at Paula. That is not a title. A small sound moved around the table. Not laughter, not yet, just air returning to people. Brandon held up both hands. We're not going to turn this into an argument. I have prepared a simple acknowledgement. He took a document from Paula's folder. Megan stared at it like she had never seen it. That told me enough. Brandon walked toward me and set the paper on the table. Calvin, this lets you step back gracefully. No one needs to be embarrassed. I looked at the top line. Voluntary Founder Advisory Retirement and Facility Conduct Agreement. There was my name, Calvin Mercer. There was a signature line. There was today's date. Below it was another line for Megan. Family witness. I did not pick up the pen. Brandon slid one toward me anyway. Sign it, and we're done. The room went quiet enough for me to hear the compressor through 2 walls. I said, what happens if I don't? His eyes flicked to the table, then back. We proceed without your cooperation. With what authority? He smiled again. Company authority. Elise said, Brandon, I need you to define that. He turned on her. I need you to stop interrupting. No. That one word landed clean. Brandon froze. Elise opened her binder and took out a printed policy. Mercer Industrial Repair Compensation and Authority Policy, revised May 2019. Executive compensation adjustments require owner council review and written approval outside the requesting employee's chain of authority. Brandon's face changed. Not much. Enough. She continued. Facility access restrictions for founders, retirees, vendors, or family members require documented safety cause, HR review, and legal sign-off. Paula said, this is exactly why leadership has to change. Elise turned a page. Medical capacity concerns require direct verification from the issuing physician, consent where required, and review by owner council. HR received an emailed letter. It is unsigned in the transmitted copy. Brandon said, that's a formatting issue. Elise looked at him. It came from your personal email. Megan whispered, Brandon. He did not answer her. I watched him do the math. His first plan had counted on me getting embarrassed. His second plan had counted on the room staying scared. Both plans were starting to bind up. He reached for a different gear. This is exactly the kind of confusion I'm talking about, he said. Calvin is 70. He's been wandering through the shop. He shut down a conveyor this week without authorization. Ted spoke then. He saved the motor. Brandon looked at him. Excuse me? Ted's hands were folded over his stomach. Conveyor 3. The bearing was singing. We pulled it. Inner race was chewed up. Another hour, and we'd have lost the shaft. Brandon said, that's not the point. Vince from dispatch said, it cost $386 to fix. Ray said, a shaft would have been $8,000 easy. Carla said downtime on that line was quoted at $11,200 per shift. Brandon's neck went red. I kept still. There are days when other people swing the hammer for you. Best thing you can do is not get your fingers in the way. Paula tapped the table. This is not about one motor. No, Elise said. It isn't. She pulled another sheet. Brandon's eyes went straight to it. Elise said, on Monday, payroll received a scheduled salary adjustment for Brandon Vale. Current base salary, $142,000. New base salary, $189,000. Entered last Friday. Carla's mouth opened. Elise went on. Approval field lists Brandon Vale. Brandon said that was part of the transition package. What transition package? Carla asked. Brandon pointed toward me. The one necessitated by Calvin's condition. I heard Megan breathe in sharp. Elise turned another page. Also entered last Friday. Vehicle allowance, $1,200 per month, despite current assignment of company truck number 17. Ray said, that truck's in his driveway every night. Brandon said, Ray leaned back. You asked for professional. Paula stood halfway. This is inappropriate. Brandon is being attacked. No, Elise said. He is being reviewed. Brandon slammed his palm on the table, not hard enough to scare a shop man, hard enough to tell the room he had run out of better tools. Enough, he said. I'm the operations director. Elise nodded. You are. I have delegated authority. You do. Then this meeting is under my authority. Elise closed the binder 1 inch, only until you exceed it. That was when the side door opened. Sutter came in wearing a dark raincoat and carrying a flat leather folder. He must have entered through accounting. That was his way. He never liked the lobby when a room was hot. Brandon stared at him. "Who let you in?" Carla raised one hand. "I did." Sutter nodded to her. "Thank you." Paula sat down slowly. She knew him. Not well, maybe, but she knew the kind of lawyer who sent letters before breakfast and got answers before supper. Sutter did not sit. He said, "I'm here as counsel." Brandon said, "For whom?" Sutter looked at Elise. "For the company's ownership interests." That was not the same as saying my name. It was close enough to make Brandon blink. Paula said, "We don't need outside counsel in an internal meeting." Sutter said, "You do today." Brandon pointed at the door. "This is a closed leadership session." Sutter set his folder on the table. Then leadership should be precise. I bent down and lifted the canvas bag onto my lap. Every eye touched it. I unzipped it, took out Ruth's ledger, and set it on the table in front of me. The old cover looked out of place under those glass walls. Brown leather, worn corners, Ruth's neat label on the spine. Mercer. Megan covered her mouth. Brandon looked at the book and tried to decide whether to laugh. "Calvin," he said softly, "this isn't show and tell." "No." "Then what is it?" "A record." "Of what?" "What was paid." He gave a short smile. "We have accounting software now." I opened the ledger to the old handwritten pages. "April 1983, I said. "Rent, $600. Lathe down payment, $3,000. Compressor, $475. First job, $920. Brandon looked at the others. "This is exactly my concern." I turned a page. "Second loan on my house, $18,000. Megan shut her eyes. "Boat sold for payroll, $2,100. Paula said, "This is sentimental manipulation." I looked at her. "Ruth pawned her mother's bracelet for $800. The room stopped. I had never said that in that building, not once. I said, "Bought it back for $940. Megan sat down then. Paula looked away first. That surprised me. Not because she felt shame, because the number had no use to her. Brandon cleared his throat. "No one doubts sacrifices were made." Sutter said, "Good, then we can respect the book." Elise stepped closer. "Calvin, may I?" I put one hand on the ledger. "Not yet." That was what my hand said. Elise understood. She stepped back. Brandon saw that and mistook it for weakness. He took the pen and tapped the retirement paper. "This room has given you respect. Now sign." I looked at him. "No. A simple word can do a lot of work." His mouth tightened. "Then I'm placing you on restricted access effective immediately." "Are you?" "Yes." "Say the reason." He leaned over the table. "Confusion." There it was again. Confusion, as if a man who could read run out by sound could not read a trap when it sat on letterhead. Sutter opened his folder. "Before that word becomes part of any company record, I need to advise everyone present that false capacity claims create exposure." Brandon said, "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm defining risk." Paula's voice sharpened. "Brandon, don't answer him." That was the wrong thing to say in front of managers. Carla looked up fast. Elise wrote something down. Brandon heard it too. He tried to recover. "There's no false claim," he said. "We have family concern, physician concern, operational concern, and lender expectations." Sutter's eyes lifted. "Lender expectations?" Brandon went still. That was a bolt snapping under torque. Sutter said, "Which lender?" Paula said, "He misspoke." Brandon turned to her. "Mom." Now everyone knew where to look. I did not look at Paula. I watched Megan. She had both hands flat on the table, like she needed the wood to stay upright. Sutter asked again, "Which lender?" Brandon said, "General business financing." Carla said, "We don't have new debt." Sutter said, "Mercer Industrial does not." Brandon's face went pale under the red. Elise opened a separate folder. HR found a file titled Succession Communications Draft. uploaded through Paula Vale Consulting. It states that interim operational authority would be assumed by Brandon Vale due to Calvin Mercer's health concerns. Paula said, draft language is not policy. Elise said, it also says with full family support. Megan looked at Brandon. You used my name? He said, Meg, not now. Did you? It's phrasing. My name is not phrasing. That was the first clean thing she had said in that room. I looked down at Ruth's ledger. My thumb rested against the edge of her envelope. Brandon saw Megan turning and went after the weakest brace. You knew, he said to her. We talked about Friday. Megan's face crumpled. You said we'd talk. I said this had to happen. You said Dad would understand. He doesn't understand anything anymore. He should not have said that, not because it hurt me. I had been called worse by machines that paid better. He should not have said it because Megan heard herself in it. She heard the lie she had been carrying. She stood up. Don't. Brandon turned on her. Sit down. The room changed again. Slow. Hard. Ray pushed his chair back 2 inches. Ted did the same. Sutter said, Brandon. Brandon caught himself. He buttoned his jacket with shaking fingers. I'm sorry. This is emotional. Elise said, the record will reflect that. He gave her a look that would have gotten him written up in any decent shop. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He looked down. I saw only the name at the top before he snatched it up. Gem City. He declined the call. 3 seconds later, Paula's phone buzzed. She declined hers too. Nobody spoke. Then the conference room phone rang. Carla stared at it. Brandon said, Don't answer that. Carla answered it. Mercer Industrial, conference room. She listened. Her eyes moved to Sutter. It's Gem City Capital, she said. Brandon said, Hang up. Sutter lifted a hand. Put them on speaker. Brandon stepped toward the phone. No. Ray stood. He did not threaten. He just stood between Brandon and the phone. Carla pressed speaker. A woman's voice came through, crisp and annoyed. This is Naomi Price with Gem City Capital. I'm trying to reach Brandon Vale regarding today's certification deadline. Sutter said, Ms. Price, this is Martin Sutter, counsel for Mercer Industrial Ownership Interests. A pause. Then, Mr. Sutter, we received your preservation letter. Brandon whispered, End the call. Sutter said, You are on speaker in a room with company managers. Do not disclose confidential personal financial information unless authorized. Naomi Price said, Understood. We are seeking confirmation only. Our file contains representations from Mr. Vale regarding anticipated compensation and a pending governance transition at Mercer Industrial Repair. We have not received supporting company authorization. The room held still. Sutter said, There is no company authorization. Naomi Price said, That is helpful. Paula closed her eyes. Brandon looked like a man watching water rise under a door. Naomi continued, We will update our file accordingly. Mr. Vale was advised that unsupported representations may affect renewal terms. Sutter said, Preserve all documents. Already flagged. The call ended. No one moved for a long second. Then Carla said very softly, Governance transition. Brandon turned to me with hate in his eyes. He finally forgot the room. You did this. I shook my head. You borrowed against air. Paula said, Calvin, please. That was new. Please. It came late and it came cheap, but there it was. She leaned toward me. This can stay inside the family. I looked at the managers. It left family when it entered payroll. Elise wrote that down too. Brandon grabbed the retirement paper and pushed it at me again. Sign it. Sutter said, Do not touch that document, Calvin. I did not. Brandon's voice dropped. You want Megan in this? Megan flinched. I looked up at him. Careful. He smiled, but his lip trembled. She knew enough. That was his next plan. If he could not stand on Megan, he would pull her down with him. Megan whispered, Brandon. He did not stop. She knew there was a lender. She knew there was debt. She knew Friday mattered. I felt something cold settle in me. Ruth had warned me about this too, though she never used his name. If someone is using her fear, stop them. I opened the ledger and removed Ruth's envelope. Megan stared at it. Brandon said, "What is that?" I said, "Your mother-in-law." Paula's face hardened. I took out the note, unfolded it, and placed it on top of the retirement agreement. I did not hand it to Elise yet. The handwriting was Ruth's. Anyone who knew her church sign-up sheets could tell. Tight loops, strong downstrokes, no wasted space. I said, "Megan, read the last line." She shook her head. Tears had already started. "Read it." Her voice barely worked. "Measure twice, then set it down." I nodded. Brandon said, "This is disgusting." Megan turned on him. "Don't talk about Mom. I'm talking about him using her." "No," she said. "You used me." That landed harder than the lender call. Paula reached for Megan. "Honey, don't let them twist this." Megan pulled her arm away. There was the first clean break. Not full freedom, not yet. Just the first bolt loosened after years of rust. Elise said, "I recommend immediate suspension of Brandon Vale's access pending investigation." Brandon laughed. "You recommend?" "Yes." "To whom?" The question hung there. The whole room wanted the answer. The ledger lay open. Ruth's note sat on top of Brandon's paper. Sutter's folder waited beside it. Elise had the binder. The digital file was only a few clicks away. We were close to the thing Brandon did not know. Too close. Sutter looked at me. I shook my head once. Not yet. He understood. Elise closed her binder halfway. "To company counsel and ownership interests." Brandon said, "That means nothing." Sutter said, "It means enough for today." Brandon looked around the room, searching for one person who still saw him as the man in charge. He found no one. So he went small and mean. He pointed at me. "You're done here. I don't care what papers you brought." I stood slowly. The chair legs made a low scrape. My knees hurt. My back hurt. 70 years is not a costume. It sends bills every morning. But I stood. I put Ruth's note back inside the ledger. I placed Brandon's unsigned retirement agreement on top of Paula's folder. Then I said, "I won't sign away what I built to cover what you hid." Brandon's eyes flashed. "You don't know what I hid." "No," I said, "but counsel does." Sutter picked up his folder. Elise said, "Brandon, surrender your company phone and access card." He stared at her. "No." Ray walked to the wall beside the door and used his own badge. The reader blinked green. He said, "Mine still works." That was not a joke. It meant Brandon's did not have to. Elise turned to Carla. "Please disable Brandon's remote administrative access pending review." Carla looked at Brandon. Then she opened her laptop. Brandon said, "Carla, you do that and you're finished." Carla kept typing. "I've got 2 kids in school and a mortgage at $174,000. I'm not losing my job over your parents' restaurant." Paula made a small sound. That number, that restaurant, that call. It all tied together now in front of people. Brandon's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen and did not answer. Elise held out her hand. "Phone and card." He looked at Megan. "Tell them to stop." She could barely stand there, but she said it. "No." Just that. "No." He stared at her as if she had broken a machine he owned. Then he took the access card from his pocket and threw it on the table. It slid across the glass and stopped against Ruth's ledger. I did not like that. I picked up the card with 2 fingers and set it aside. The phone took longer. He held it like there was still authority inside it. Sutter said, "Brandon." Brandon placed it on the table. Elise took both. "Until reviewed," she said. Brandon gave a bitter laugh. "Reviewed by whom? This old man and his memory book?" I put the ledger back into the canvas bag. "By people who can read." That got the first real sound from the room. Not much. Enough. Brandon turned and walked out. Paula followed him so fast her folder stayed on the table. Megan did not follow at first. She looked at me. "Dad," she said. I wanted to go to her. I did not. Not in that room. Not while the dust was still in the air. I said, "Go, if you need to." She looked toward the hall, then at the empty chair where Brandon had been. "I don't know where to go." That was the saddest, honest sentence I had heard all week. Sutter said, "For today, go home. Do not sign anything. Do not discuss company documents." Megan nodded, but she looked at me. I said, "Call me tonight." She wiped her face. "Will you answer?" "Yes." She left through the same door Brandon had used, but she did not hurry after him. When the door closed, the room stayed quiet. Elise put Brandon's phone into an evidence pouch from her HR cabinet. I did not know she kept those. I should have. Elise kept everything. Carla said, "Calvin, what happens now?" I looked at the people around that table. They deserved more truth than they had been given. They did not need the whole load dropped on them yet. "Now," I said, "you keep working." Ted nodded. "And him?" I looked at Brandon's card on the table. He wanted Friday. No one spoke. I picked up the canvas bag. "So we'll finish Friday properly." Carla closed her laptop and said, "His remote admin is off." Elise put Brandon's access card into the same pouch as the phone. "I'll log chain of custody." Ray looked at me. "You want us on the floor?" "Yes." Ted said, "What about his morning orders?" "Show me." Ted slid a tablet across the table. His finger tapped the screen once. He pulled crew from Apex Press. That made me look up. Apex Press was not a small call. Their stamping line fed 3 plants south of Dayton. If that line stayed down, the penalty clock started at noon. Mercer Industrial had a service agreement on that account worth $684,000 a year. I asked, "Why?" Ted swallowed. "Says truck 17 was reserved for executive transport." Ray said, "That means him." Elise looked at the tablet. He reassigned 2 welders to prep the upstairs office. "What office?" Carla answered that one. "Your old office." I had not used that office in 8 years. Ruth used to keep a fern in the window. She said a shop office needed one living thing that did not wear boots. I said, "Prep it how?" Carla looked down. "Paint, new furniture, brass nameplate." Ted said it said president. The room went quiet again, but it was a different quiet. Before, people were shocked. Now they were adding numbers. I said, "Cancel the furniture." Carla nodded. "Already did." "No, call them. Tell them we'll pay the restocking fee." "That's 12%. "How much?" $840. "Pay it. I don't want a vendor eating Brandon's mistake." That mattered to me. A man shows himself by who he leaves holding the invoice. Ray pointed toward the shop. "Apex still needs us." "Take truck 12, I said. "Put Javier and Mike on it." Ted said, "Brandon pulled Mike's overtime. Restore it." Elise said, "Calvin, you don't have an active operations login." "I know." Carla looked at me for half a second. Then she said, "I can process it under emergency continuity." Sutter gave her a small nod. "Use that phrase. You have to understand something about a good shop. It does not run on titles. It runs on people who know where the tools are and who can be trusted when a machine is down." Brandon had spent 3 years learning the first part. He never learned the second. Ray left first. Ted followed him, already calling the floor. Elise stayed with Sutter and Carla. I stayed because the room was not done with me yet. Carla said, "Calvin, there's one more thing." I did not like the way she said it. "What?" She turned the laptop toward Elise, not me. "There's a pending payroll batch." Elise leaned in. "For Friday?" "Yes." Sutter asked, "What kind?" Carla's voice went flat. "Special executive incentive distribution." I felt my hand close around the canvas handle. Elise asked, "Amount?" Carla read from the screen. $128,000. Sutter said, "Recipient?" Brandon Vale. Elise closed her eyes for one breath. "Approval chain?" Carla said, "Submitted by Brandon. Approved by Brandon under Delegated Operations Authority." Sutter's mouth tightened. "Second approval?" That's where it gets worse. I said, "Say it." Carla clicked once. "Second approval field shows Calvin Mercer." Elise looked at me. I said, "I didn't approve it." "I know," Carla said. "The IP address is from Brandon's office." Sutter took out a pen. "Timestamp?" "Last night, 9:46. At 9:46, I had been sitting in Ruth's kitchen with cold coffee and her ledger open under the yellow light. I remembered because the furnace kicked on at 9:50 and made that loose rattle I still had not fixed. Sutter said, "Do not delete it." Carla almost laughed. "I wasn't going to." Elise wrote it down. "Payroll hold?" "Yes," Sutter said. "Administrative hold pending legal review." Carla typed carefully. "It'll need a reason." I said, "Put unauthorized approval." She did. Those 2 words did not shout. They did not need to. They dropped into the system and locked $128,000 behind a wall Brandon could not charm. My phone rang then. Megan. I looked at the name until the third ring. Then I answered. Yes. Her voice was low. Dad, Brandon's outside. Outside where? The house. Yours? No, yours. Carla looked up. Sutter heard enough from my face. I asked, Are you with him? No. Where are you? In my car, across from Lottie's. Stay there. He's angry. I know. He says you stole his phone. I looked at Elise. Company phone. Elise said, Correct. Megan heard that. She started crying, but quietly. That hurt worse than the loud kind. I said, Megan, listen to me. Do not meet him alone today. He's my husband. I know. I don't know what I'm doing. Then do nothing fast. That was one of Ruth's lines. Megan heard it too. She stopped crying for a second. I said, Go inside Lottie's. Sit in the back booth. Everyone will stare. Let them. She breathed into the phone. Will you come? Yes. Sutter shook his head once. I covered the phone. What? He said, If Brandon is at your house, don't go alone. I'm not going home. Sutter looked at me for a long second, then he understood. Lottie's is public. Half of Marrow Bend before noon. That's why I don't like it. That's why I do. I told Megan I'll be there in 10. She said, Dad? Yes. Did Mom know? That question had been waiting under every other question. I looked at Ruth's ledger in the canvas bag. She knew enough. Megan said nothing. I said, Go what? Go inside. When I hung up, Elise said, I should go with you. No, you stay here. Calvin, Brandon's Friday money is in payroll. That's the next hinge. She understood that word. Hinge. One side of a door means nothing without it. Sutter said, I'm coming. I nodded. Bring your folder. Carla said, What about Dennis and Paula? I turned back. What about them? They just emailed accounting. She turned the laptop again. The subject line was short. Urgent vendor settlement. The sender was Paula Vale. Attached was an invoice from Vale Family Hospitality for consulting services rendered to Mercer Industrial Repair. Sutter said, Open the amount only. Carla did, $74,500. Elise read the description out loud. Transition Advisory Services. I almost smiled, but it had no humor in it. They billed us for stealing from us, Carla said. Sutter closed his folder. Forward it to me. Preserve headers. Carla said, Already doing it. I looked at Elise. Now you know why you stay. She nodded. I'll lock down vendor additions. Good. Sutter and I walked out through accounting, not the lobby. I saw Ruth's bench space as we passed. The wall still had the clean rectangle where the brass plate had been. Brandon had moved the bench, but he had not understood what its absence showed. A missing thing can testify. Outside, Sycamore Street was wet from a thin morning rain. The asphalt shone dull black. My pickup sat in the visitor lot because Brandon had taken my old numbered space 2 months earlier and put a reserved sign there. Sutter saw me look at it. He said, Want that removed? Not yet. He gave me that lawyer look. You keep saying that. I know. At Lottie's, the front windows were fogged around the edges. The breakfast crowd had thinned, but the counter was still full enough to listen. That was Lottie's. You could settle a parts bill, hear about a school board vote, and learn which factory had missed payroll before your eggs cooled. Megan sat in the back booth with both hands around a mug. She looked 10 years younger and 20 years older. Sutter slid into the booth beside me. Megan looked at him. He said, I'm here so no one twists your words. She nodded. I asked, Where's Brandon? He left your driveway. Where's he going? I don't know. Sutter said, Did he text you? She pushed her phone across the table. I did not pick it up. Sutter did. He read quietly, Tell your father he either fixes this or I show them what he's been hiding. Megan whispered, What does that mean? I said, He wants you scared. He says there are old tax things. Sutter's face did not change. There are always old tax things. That's why adults keep accountants. Megan almost smiled. It broke before it formed. I asked, What did you sign? Her eyes lifted. Anything for Gem City? No. Anything for Paula? No. Anything for Brandon? She took too long. Sutter leaned forward. Megan. She opened her purse and took out a folded paper. He said it was for household refinancing. I knew before she unfolded it. A man who has seen enough cracked housings can hear one before the oil leaks. The paper was a consent acknowledgement, not a loan, not exactly. It stated that Megan Vale was aware of pledged future income, expected advancement, and pending senior transition at Mercer Industrial Repair. Sutter read it once, then again. Did he explain this? He said it meant his bonus was stable. What bonus? She looked at me. I said, there isn't one. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Sutter asked, did he watch you sign? Yes. Was Paula there? Megan nodded. She said wives support husbands. That sounded like Paula, neat, soft, poison in a teacup. I asked, where did this happen? At their restaurant. What day? Tuesday night. I remembered Tuesday. Brandon had told me Megan was home with a headache. I had stood outside their kitchen door with a grocery bag and left it on the porch because no one answered. Megan looked at the paper. Can they use this against me? Sutter said, they can try. It doesn't authorize company action. But it says I knew. It says what Brandon needed it to say. She wiped her cheek. I signed it. I said, you were afraid. That doesn't fix it. No. That was hard for her to hear. It was hard for me to say, but soft lies had brought us here. The bell over Lottie's door rang. Brandon came in first. Paula came behind him. Dennis Vale followed with his coat collar turned up, though the rain had already stopped. Dennis had always looked like a man posing beside money. He wore good shoes and talked with both hands. His restaurant on Route 40 had opened with white tablecloths and closed with unpaid invoices stacked in a drawer. He still called it a temporary restructuring. Brandon saw us and walked straight back. Paula touched his arm. Keep calm. That was rich. Lottie herself looked over from the register. She did not say a word. She did not have to. Lottie could make a coffee refill feel like testimony. Brandon stopped at the booth. Meg, get up. She gripped her mug. I said, sit down, Brandon. He looked at Sutter. This is harassment. Sutter said, you walked over here. Dennis slid into the empty chair at the end of the booth without being invited. Calvin, this has gone too far. I looked at him. Your invoice went farther. His face changed. Paula sat beside Megan, but Megan moved closer to the wall. Paula said, we sent a legitimate consulting bill. Sutter said, for transition advisory services. Dennis smiled. We advised on family continuity. I said, $74,500 worth? Dennis spread his hands. That's reasonable for crisis work. Brandon leaned over the table. You're creating the crisis. No, I said. I stopped paying it. Paula lowered her voice. Calvin, people are listening. They usually do in here. She looked around and saw 3 men at the counter pretending not to hear. One of them drove forklifts at Apex. Another sold bearings. The third had fixed the church boiler with me in 1991. Brandon said, you love this. I looked at him. No. Then why bring her here? She called me. She's my wife. Megan said, I'm also his daughter. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Dennis pointed at the paper on the table. That document is private. Sutter put his hand on it. It became relevant when your family used it to support financial representations. Dennis smiled again, thinner now. That's a lawyer sentence. Yes, Sutter said. I'm a lawyer. Paula turned to Megan. Honey, you're overwhelmed. Brandon is trying to protect both families. Megan looked at her. From what? Paula blinked. Megan asked again. From what? Brandon said, from your father's instability. There was the word again wearing a new coat, instability. As if the man who kept their payroll, their lease deposits, and their son's title standing upright was the weak post in the wall. I set one hand on the table. Say what you mean. Brandon's jaw moved. Fine. You're not capable of running a company. I retired from running it. You don't know modern operations. I know payroll can't approve itself. That one landed. Dennis said, Brandon made an administrative error. Sutter said, at 9:46 last night. Paula looked at Brandon. Brandon said, I was clearing a backlog. Under Calvin's approval field? Sutter asked. Brandon sat back. Ask your questions in writing. Sutter smiled a little. I will. Megan looked at Brandon. Did you use Dad's login? No. Sutter said, that was quick. Brandon glared at him. Megan said, did you? Brandon turned to her. You don't understand what pressure I'm under. Dennis said, son, Brandon ignored him. Your father sits on everything. He hoards control. He hoards cash. He watches us struggle and acts noble. I felt that one in my chest, but I kept still. Megan whispered, you said he was broke. I looked at her. She covered her mouth. Brandon froze. Sutter asked, who said Calvin was broke? Megan's eyes filled again. Brandon, Paula. They said the company was strained because Dad made old mistakes. They said if Brandon didn't step in, everyone could lose their jobs. Paula said, that's not fair. Megan turned to her. You said I had to help him before Dad embarrassed himself. Lottie came by with the coffee pot. She stopped at the edge of the booth and looked at me. Warm up, Calvin? No, thank you. She looked at Brandon. You buying anything? Brandon stared at her. Lottie nodded once. Then lower your voice. A few men at the counter suddenly found their cups very interesting. Dennis stood. We're leaving. Brandon did not move. He looked at me with a strange calm that bothered me more than the anger had. You want Friday? He said. Fine, Friday. Sutter said, be careful. Brandon smiled at him. You too. He looked at Megan. You come home or you choose this. Megan's face went pale. I wanted to answer for her. I did not. She stared at her mug for a long moment. Then she said, I'm going to Dad's. Brandon laughed once. Of course you are. Paula stood so fast her purse hit the table. Megan, don't be foolish. Megan slid out of the booth. Her knees shook, but she stood. I'm getting clothes, she said. Brandon stepped aside with a little bow that made me want to put my hand through the table. I did not. I had spent my life around machines. You learn early that rage is just another spinning part. Touch it wrong and it takes fingers. Dennis, Paula, and Brandon walked out together. Lottie waited until the bell stopped moving. Then she set a paper bag on the table. Ham sandwich, she said. You forgot lunch. I didn't order. I know. I reached for my wallet. She shook her head. Ruth paid for enough coffee in this town. That was the closest I came to breaking in front of strangers. Megan drove behind me to the house on Sycamore Street. Sutter followed in his sedan. Brandon's tire tracks were still dark in my driveway. The front porch light was on, though I had turned it off that morning. I stopped before opening the door. Sutter said, What is it? I pointed at the lock. Scratch marks. Megan stepped back. He came inside. I unlocked the door and pushed it open with my fingertips. Nothing looked wrong at first. Ruth's kitchen was still Ruth's kitchen. The blue curtains, the old clock, the table with the nick on one corner from when Megan dropped a cast iron pan at 16 and cried like she had damaged a museum piece. Then I saw the cedar box on the counter. It was open. Megan made a sound behind me. Sutter said, Don't touch it. I stood in the doorway and looked. The brass key lay beside the box. The false bottom was lifted. Ruth's recipe cards were scattered, but the ledger was not there because I had it in the canvas bag. That was the first mercy of the day. Megan whispered, Dad, I'm sorry. You didn't do this. He came because of me. No, I said. He came because of him. Sutter took pictures with his phone. Every angle, the counter, the lock, the box, the lifted panel. He asked, what was normally in there? Recipes on top, ledger under the false bottom. Anything else? Ruth's note. Megan looked at me. He knew about the box? No. Sutter said, somebody did. That sentence sat there. Megan slowly turned toward the street. Paula. I said nothing. Megan said, after Mom's service, Paula helped me clean the kitchen. I showed her the box. I said Mom kept important things in it. She sat down hard in Ruth's chair. I thought I was telling a nice story. I put the canvas bag on the table and kept my hand on it. Sutter said, Calvin, this changes the posture. How? He was searching for the ledger. He didn't find it. No, but now he knows it matters. I looked at the cedar box. Ruth had kept that box smooth with lemon oil. Brandon had left pry marks near the hinge. Something in me settled then. Not anger. Anger burns too hot to measure. This was colder and more useful. I said, Megan, get what you need from your house with Sutter. She looked up. Where will you be? At the shop. Dad, no. I need to move one thing. Sutter said, what thing? I lifted the canvas bag. This. He shook his head. Keep it with you. I am. At all times. I heard you. He looked at Megan. You do not go inside if Brandon is there. She nodded. If Paula is there, you do not discuss documents. I won't. If Dennis calls, let it ring. She nodded again. I drove back to Mercer Industrial with Ruth's ledger on the passenger seat and one hand resting on it at every red light. Marrow Bend looked normal through the windshield. Sycamore Street had puddles near the curb. The bank sign blinked 47 degrees. A school bus hissed at the corner. A town can look steady while a family foundation cracks underneath it. At the shop, the front lobby smelled faintly of wet coats and machine oil. The missing bench space looked louder now. Carla met me before I reached accounting. You need to see this. I followed her to her desk. Elise was already there with 2 printed pages. Her face had that controlled look people get when they have found something ugly and useful. Carla said, Vendor lock caught another attempt. From Vale Family Hospitality? No, from BV Transition Services. Elise handed me the paper. BV Transition Services had been created as a vendor in the system 2 weeks earlier. Mailing address, the Vale Restaurant. Bank account, same routing number as Brandon's payroll deposit. First invoice pending Friday. Amount, $59,000. Description, leadership continuity retainer. I read it twice. Carla said, he split the money. Sutter was still with Megan, so Elise spoke carefully. The $128,000 incentive was not the only Friday payment. What else? Carla turned the screen. There were 3 pending items now frozen in the queue. $128,000 to Brandon, $74,500 to Vale Family Hospitality, $59,000 to BV Transition Services, total $261,500. Elise said, that's before the vehicle allowance. I said, and before the loan representations. Carla nodded. Friday wasn't about firing you. No. Elise looked at me. It was about getting paid before anyone looked. There it was. The phrase by Friday had been wearing a work shirt, but underneath it was a cash grab in a suit. I asked, can he still reach payroll? No. Bank portal? Carla hesitated. Elise looked at her. Carla. Operations had view access. Only view? That's what policy says. What does reality say? Carla turned back to the keyboard. Reality says Brandon requested temporary release authority last month. Elise's face hardened. Who approved it? Carla did not answer right away. I said, show me. She opened the audit trail, approved by Calvin Mercer. I was getting tired of seeing my own name used like stolen shop keys. Elise said, timestamp? Carla read it. June 3rd, 7:12 in the morning. I knew exactly where I had been. Cleveland. Bearing failure at North Coast Pack, I had the hotel receipt in my glove box for $139.52. Elise said, Calvin? I was out of town. Carla whispered, then he had more than payroll. I looked through the glass wall toward the shop floor. Men were moving with purpose again. Truck 12 was gone. Apex would get its welders. The company was still breathing, but someone had been pinching the line. Freeze bank release authority, I said. Carla said, I can request it. Do it. It'll alert him. He already knows. Elise said, we need counsel. Call Sutter. He's with Megan. Then call him twice. Elise reached for her phone. I walked into my old office. The door was open. The fern was gone, of course. The walls had fresh primer on half of them. A new executive desk sat in pieces against the wall, still wrapped in plastic. On the window ledge sat a brass nameplate, Brandon Vale, President. The vendor had delivered it early. I picked it up. It had weight to it. Not much. Enough to fool a man who thought title and authority were the same metal. Ray appeared in the doorway. Apex is covered, he said. Line should be up by 2. Good. He looked at the nameplate in my hand. Want me to toss it? No. I set it on the bare desk frame. Ray stepped closer. Calvin, the guys are asking. What? If Brandon's coming back. What did you tell them? That I don't know. That's the truth. Ray nodded, but he did not leave. I asked, what else? He took off his cap and turned it in his hands. Truck 17 just came through the east gate. I looked out the window. Brandon's company truck rolled past the parts bay and stopped near the loading dock. He was driving. Paula sat beside him. Ray said, "Gate should have denied him." Carla disabled his card. "He didn't use the gate." I looked again. The old service chain near the east fence hung loose. Ray said, "He cut the padlock." I put Brandon's nameplate down. "Stay here," I said. Ray shook his head. "No." I looked at him. He said, "You can fire me later." We walked toward the loading dock together. Elise came out of accounting at the same time, phone at her ear. She said, "Sutter's coming back." Brandon climbed out of truck 17 with a cardboard file box in his arms. Paula got out with a leather tote. Elise called across the dock, "Brandon, you are not authorized past this point." He smiled. "I'm collecting personal items." Ray said, "From the loading dock?" Brandon looked at me. "Tell your guard dog to heel." Ray took one slow breath. I said, "Ray's working." Paula stepped forward. "Calvin, we need the original ledger." Elise's head turned fast. I said, "Why?" Paula held up her tote. "To settle questions." "You broke into my house to settle questions?" Her face tightened. "No one broke in." Brandon said, "Careful." Paula ignored him. "Megan told us where Ruth kept it." I said, "Megan told you years ago." "She trusted me." "No," I said, "you used a memory." That one reached her. For the first time, Paula looked older. Brandon set the cardboard box on the dock. "Give me the ledger, Calvin." "No." "You don't even know what's in it." "I know every page." "Then you know it's dangerous." I looked at him. "For you." He opened the cardboard box. Inside were copied files, payroll forms, draft letters, a printed org chart, and on top a page with my scanned signature at the bottom. Elise said, "Do not remove documents." Brandon picked up the signed page and held it so I could see it. It was a resignation acceptance. Mine. Dated Friday. My name sat at the bottom in black ink. Calvin Mercer. It was not my hand. It was close enough to fool a banker who had never seen me sign a parts receipt on a greasy fender. Brandon said, "You're going to cooperate." Ray took one step forward. I lifted my hand and he stopped. Brandon said, "Friday can be clean or Friday can be ugly." I looked at the paper, then at him. "You still think Friday belongs to you." He smiled. Elise's phone was still in her hand. I heard Sutter's voice through it, small and sharp. "Is he there?" Elise said, "Yes." Sutter said, "Put me on speaker." She did. Sutter's voice came across the loading dock. "Brandon, place the document on the nearest flat surface and step back." Brandon laughed. "Or what?" "Or you will explain possession of a disputed company record after suspension." Paula said, "Martin, that's unnecessary." Sutter said, "Mrs. Vale, stop talking." That got every ear on the dock. Brandon's smile slipped. Sutter continued, "Calvin, is the ledger with you?" I put my hand on the canvas bag strap. "Yes." "Keep it sealed. I'm 6 minutes away." Brandon looked from the phone to me. He understood then that the ledger was not just old paper. He understood it was a loaded pallet sitting above him, and the chain had started to creak. He put the forged resignation on the dock plate. Elise moved toward it with an evidence sleeve. Brandon said, "Touch that and I sue." Elise kept walking. "Get in line." She sleeved the page. I almost smiled at that. Elise had been quiet for 20 years, but quiet is not soft. Paula grabbed Brandon's arm. "We need to go." Brandon looked at me once more. "This isn't over." "No," I said. "It's finally under review." He hated that more than a curse. They left truck 17 by the dock and walked toward Paula's car outside the broken east gate. Ray watched them until they were past the fence. Then he looked at the cut chain. "Want me to replace it?" "Yes." "What kind?" "The ugly one." He nodded. "Good." Sutter arrived 5 minutes later with Megan in the passenger seat. She got out holding a small overnight bag. Her face changed when she saw the truck, the cut chain, and Elise holding the evidence sleeve. "What did he do?" I said, "He brought Friday early." She looked at the paper through the sleeve. "Is that your signature?" "No." She put one hand to her stomach. Sutter said, "We are moving all relevant documents to the conference room safe until tomorrow's meeting." Elise said, "Tomorrow?" Sutter looked at me. I said, Friday. Megan whispered, the manager's meeting. Yes. Carla came onto the dock with her laptop hugged against her chest. The bank removed Brandon's release authority, she said. They want written confirmation by close of business. Sutter said, they'll have it. Carla looked at me. They asked who has authority. The dock went still. That was the doorway, not the room yet. Just the doorway. I said, tell them Mercer Industrial will provide verified ownership certification tomorrow morning. Sutter looked at me. He knew what that meant. Elise knew too. Carla did not, but she heard enough to stand straighter. Megan looked from one face to another. Dad? I picked up the canvas bag. Tomorrow you'll hear it with everyone else. I did not say it to be cruel. I said it because Megan had spent too long hearing truth in private and fear in public. Some things had to be laid on the table where the lie had room to die. That evening, I bolted Ruth's cedar box shut and put it in the bedroom closet, high on the shelf where she used to hide Christmas gifts. Megan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she did not drink. She said, I keep hearing him say you were broke. I rinsed my hands at the sink. Did you believe him? She looked down. Some days. That one hurt. I dried my hands on Ruth's towel. Why? Because you never talked about money. No. And he talked about it all the time. I sat across from her. He talked about money because he needed yours quiet and mine imaginary. She nodded, but she was crying again. I'm sorry, she said. I looked at my daughter in Ruth's chair and thought about every time I had mistaken silence for strength. A sealed bearing still needs grease if the seal fails. You can be sorry, I said, but tomorrow you tell the truth. She wiped her face. About what? What you signed, what Paula said, what Brandon told you. In front of everyone? Yes. She looked toward the dark window. I'm scared. I know. Were you ever scared? I almost said no. Old men lie that way sometimes. Yes, I said. Plenty. What did you do? I measured twice. She gave a weak laugh through tears. And then, I looked at Ruth's empty chair. Then I set it down. I slept in the front room that night with my boots beside the chair and Ruth's ledger under my coat. Megan slept upstairs in her old room. I heard her walk the floor twice before midnight. Each time she stopped near the stairs like she wanted to come down. Each time she went back. I did not call out. A child has to decide when to walk toward the truth. A father can leave the light on. At 5:20, I made coffee in Ruth's old percolator. The house was quiet except for the glass knob ticking on the lid. I laid the ledger on the kitchen table and opened it to the ownership page. Morrow Holdings, LLC. There it was in black ink, typed neat and dull. 100% membership interest, Calvin Mercer. Below it was the transfer certificate from Mercer Industrial Repair into Morrow Holdings, dated 11 years earlier. Sutter had drawn it up after the first time Brandon asked why I still came into the shop. Ruth had signed as witness. Her name did more to me than any threat Brandon ever made. Megan came down in jeans and a gray sweater. Her hair was pulled back rough. She looked at the ledger, then at me. Is that it? Yes. She stood across the table and did not sit. Can I see? I turned the ledger toward her. She read for a long time, not because the words were hard, because the meaning was. Finally she said, You own it. Yes. All of it? All of it. She put one hand on the back of Ruth's chair. Then why did you let him talk to you like that? I took a drink of coffee. It was too hot, but I needed something plain in my mouth. Because a man tells you more when he thinks you can't hurt him. She looked down at the page again. Did Mom know? Ruth knew before the ink dried. Megan touched the corner of the paper. Morrow was her maiden name. That was her idea. She closed her eyes. He thought it was some outside investment group. Yes. He told me they were blocking him. They were. Dad. I looked at her. She said, I helped him complain about you. I know. I said you were stubborn. You were right. I said you were confused. That one sat between us. Confused. Brandon had loved that word because it sounded softer than stealing a man's place. Paula had used it because it made cruelty sound like concern. Megan had repeated it because fear makes people borrow language from whoever is loudest. I said, Today you don't borrow his words. She nodded once. I won't. Sutter arrived at 6:15. He wore the same coat as the night before and carried 2 locked document cases. Elise was with him. She had not slept much either. Her hair was pinned tight, and she had a folder under one arm that looked thick enough to hold a winter. She set it on the kitchen table. "Bank confirmation," she said. "Release authority frozen. Payroll queue locked. Vehicle cards suspended. Vendor payments held." Sutter added, "Counsel notice is drafted. We do not accuse in the room. We state facts. We preserve documents. We remove access." Megan looked at him. "What happens to Brandon?" "That depends on what he says," Sutter said, "and what he already signed." Elise opened her folder. "We found the lender letter." I looked at her. "Where?" "In his personnel upload. He used our HR portal to store it under promotion materials." She slid the page across. It was from Miami Valley Commercial Credit. Credit support package, $486,000. Borrower, Vale Family Hospitality. Supporting income, anticipated executive bonus, and operating promotion compensation from Mercer Industrial Repair. Attached was Brandon's promotion letter. President. Salary increased to $240,000. Annual incentive pool up to $128,000. Signing transition payment, $74,500. At the bottom sat my scanned signature. I did not touch the page. Megan whispered, "He pledged money he didn't have." Sutter said, "He pledged company money he didn't control." Elise looked at me. "There's another attachment." She turned the page. It was worse because it was simple. A 1-page acknowledgement saying Mercer Industrial Repair expected no ownership transition obstacles and that Calvin Mercer was no longer involved in active control. Megan read it and turned pale. "No." Her voice was small. I said, "What?" She pointed to the second paragraph. That sentence. Elise read it aloud. "Family has confirmed Mr. Mercer's reduced capacity to participate in business decisions." Megan sat down. Sutter asked, "Did you sign something like that?" She pressed both hands to her mouth. "Megan," I said. She shook her head first. Then she stopped. "Brandon brought me a spousal support form," she said. "He said it was for the bank. He said it kept the restaurant from pulling against our house." He covered part with a sticky note. Sutter's face did not move. "What did it say above your signature?" "I don't know." Elise turned another page and placed it down. Megan's signature sat near the bottom. Spousal and family knowledge acknowledgement. My daughter made a sound like the chair had dropped under her, though she was still sitting in it. Sutter said, "This is why today has to be public inside the company." Megan looked at me. "I signed that. You signed what he showed you." "That won't matter." "It matters to me." She cried then, but not long. She wiped her face with her sleeve and stood up. "I'll say it." Elise closed the folder. "You may have to." At 7:40 we drove to Mercer Industrial in 2 cars. Sutter rode with me. Elise drove Megan. The parking lot was full when we arrived. Friday meetings always pulled in the supervisors from both shifts: line leads, accounting, purchasing, safety. A few foremen who still had weld burns on their sleeves and coffee in paper cups. Marrow Bend was waking up around us. Trucks rattled on County Road 6. The diner sign glowed down the street. Rainwater sat in the low place by the east fence, right where Ray had hung the ugly new chain. He was there already, leaning against the gate with his cap low. He saw my truck and lifted one hand. When I stepped out, he came over. "Brandon's inside," he said. "Glass office." "Who let him in?" He still had a mechanical key. Sutter looked at me. I said, "Of course he did." Ray's mouth tightened. "He's got Dennis with him, Paula too." Elise pulled in beside us. Megan got out and froze when she heard that. "Mom's here?" she asked. Ray nodded once. All 3. Sutter said, "No hallway arguments, conference room only." I took the canvas bag from the passenger floor and put the strap over my shoulder. Ray looked at it. "That the ledger?" "Yes." He gave it a look men give a tool that might save a job. "Good." Inside, the lobby smelled like wet rubber mats and cutting oil. The empty space where Ruth's memorial bench belonged still made my chest tighten. Somebody had leaned a delivery dolly against that wall. I moved it aside with one hand. Elise noticed. "We'll fix that," she said. Later, we walked past accounting. Carla stood by her desk with her hands folded. She looked scared, but she held eye contact. "Bank officers on the call line," she said. "Just listening." Sutter nodded. "Good." The conference room had 12 chairs and too many people. The supervisors stood along the back wall. Brandon sat at the head of the table like he had rented the air. Dennis stood behind him in a brown sport coat. Paula sat to his right with her leather tote on her lap. Megan stopped in the doorway. Brandon smiled at her. "There you are," he said. "I was worried your father was keeping you from me." Megan did not answer. Brandon looked at me next. "Calvin, you brought an audience." I put the canvas bag on the table and sat down at the far end. "No," I said. "You did." A few men shifted along the wall. Elise remained standing. Sutter stood beside the screen with his document cases. Carla slipped into the corner with her laptop. Brandon tapped the table with 2 fingers. "Before we begin," he said, "I want HR to acknowledge that Calvin has been suspended from active work pending Friday's transition." Elise looked at him. "There is no approved transition." He laughed once. "That's not what the documents say." "Which documents?" He reached into his folder and pulled out a copy of the promotion letter. "This one." Paula leaned forward. "We can still keep this respectful." Ray muttered from the back. "Might be late." I looked at him and he quieted. Brandon held up the letter. "Effective Friday, I assume the office of president. Calvin's consulting role ends. The company moves forward." Sutter said, "Read the signature line." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Read it." Brandon looked down. "Calvin Mercer." Sutter asked, "Did Calvin sign it?" Brandon smiled again, but it had work in it now. "That's a ridiculous question." Elise said, "Answer it." He set the paper down. "He authorized it." I said nothing. Outside, a forklift backed somewhere on the floor. The beep came through the wall, steady and small. Machines tell the truth if you listen long enough. Sutter opened one case. "We are here because Brandon Vale's access, vendor submissions, payroll requests, and lender representations created a conflict question." Dennis snapped, "This is a family matter." Elise looked at him. "This is a company meeting." Paula said, "Calvin, stop this now." I looked at her. "No." Brandon leaned back. "You know what? Fine. Let's have it." The old man has been confused for months. Everybody knows it. He misplaces documents. He interferes with operations. He can't accept that I've been carrying this place. A sound moved through the room. Not loud. Enough. I heard my own breathing. Slow in, slow out. Megan stepped forward. "Don't say that." Brandon turned to her. "Megan, sit down." "No." His face changed. She said, "You made me sign that bank form." Paula gripped her tote. "Megan, not here." Megan looked at her mother-in-law. "You told me it was normal." It was. "You told me Dad would embarrass us if he saw it." Paula's mouth opened, then closed. Brandon stood. "This meeting is over." Elise did not raise her voice. "Sit down, Brandon." He stared at her. "You work for me." "No," she said. "I don't." That was the first small crack the room could hear. Sutter opened the second case and removed Ruth's ledger from the canvas bag. He did it carefully. The old leather cover looked plain under the fluorescent lights. No shine, no theater. Just the book my wife had guarded under recipes for chicken and dumplings. Brandon laughed. "That's your proof? A scrapbook?" I kept my hands folded. Elise took the ledger from Sutter and opened to the page marked with Ruth's blue ribbon. Paula whispered, "Calvin." I did not look at her. Elise said, "For the record, this is the founder's ledger of Mercer Industrial Repair, maintained from the original sole proprietorship through corporate restructuring." Brandon said, "You can't enter some family diary into a personnel matter." Sutter said, "It is not being entered. It is being read." Elise turned one page. Attached ownership certification. Morrow Holdings, LLC. Sole member, Calvin Mercer. Percentage interest, 100%. The room went quiet enough for the overhead vent to sound loud. Brandon stared at Elise. She continued, "Morrow Holdings owns 100% of Mercer Industrial Repair, including operating assets, real property, equipment, accounts, receivables, and all voting control." Carla turned her laptop toward the wall screen. The same information appeared there from the digital HR ownership file. Morrow Holdings, LLC. Beneficial owner, Calvin Mercer. Verified authority, Calvin Mercer. Brandon did not blink. He looked at the screen, then at me. "No," he said. Elise said, "Yes." He pointed at the ledger. "That's old." Carla said, "Digital file was last verified by counsel this morning at 7:38. Sutter said, "Bank officer is also on the line." A speaker on the center table clicked. A woman's voice came through. "This is Audrey Bell, Miami Valley Commercial Credit. We acknowledge receipt of the ownership certification." Brandon's face lost its color. Dennis leaned over him. "What does that mean?" Brandon did not answer. Audrey Bell continued. "Based on the certification, Brandon Vale had no authority to pledge Mercer Industrial Repair compensation, assets, bonus pools, or transition payments as credit support." The words landed one at a time. Paula stood. "This is a misunderstanding." Megan said, "No, it isn't." Brandon snapped at her. "Stop talking." I stood then, not fast, not angry, just stood. He looked at me, and for the first time since he married my daughter, he looked uncertain. I said, "You told Megan you'd have me fired by Friday." His jaw tightened. I said, "You were wrong about the firing. Nobody moved." I looked at the promotion letter in front of him. "But you were right about Friday." Elise turned another page in the ledger. Employment clause, control authority. Any officer appointment requires written approval by the sole owner through Morrow Holdings. She looked at Brandon. No approval exists. Sutter handed her the conflict disclosure. Elise read it clean. Pending review, Brandon Vale's access to Mercer Industrial Repair systems, vehicles, accounts, vendor records, customer files, payroll records, and premises is suspended. Brandon shoved his chair back. "You can't do this." "I just did," Elise said. Ray stepped away from the wall, not close enough to touch him, just enough to show the aisle was not his anymore. Sutter said, "You may collect personal items later through counsel." Dennis gripped the chair. "What about the lender?" Audrey Bell said, "Miami Valley Commercial Credit will contact Vale Family Hospitality directly." Dennis looked at Paula. Paula looked at Brandon. That was the first time I saw the roof come off their house, not the one on Maple Terrace, the other one. The false one Brandon had built out of my silence. Brandon turned on me. "You set me up." "No. You hid this. I owned it. You let me work here. I let you prove yourself." He stepped closer to the table. "You let me build this place." That one brought a hard breath from the back wall. I looked around the room, at Ray, at Carla, at Elise, at the foreman who had been here when Brandon still wore shiny shoes on a shop floor, and asked which wrench was metric by color. Then I looked back at him. "You managed schedules," I said. "You did not build Mercer Industrial." His mouth twisted. "There it is, the great Calvin Mercer. No, just the owner." The words felt strange in my mouth because I had kept them off my tongue for years. I had wanted the work to speak. Work speaks fine to working people. It does not speak to men who only hear titles. Megan came around the table and stood beside me. She was shaking, but she stayed. She said, "I signed the bank form because Brandon hid the top half." Brandon pointed at her. "Don't you dare." Sutter said, "Lower your hand." Brandon dropped it, but his face burned. Megan looked at Audrey's speaker light. "I did not confirm my father's capacity. I did not know those words were there." Audrey Bell said, "That statement is noted." Paula sat down slowly. "Megan, think about your marriage." Megan looked at her. "I am." That was all she said. It was enough. Elise placed Ruth's note on top of the ledger. The paper was thin and creased at the folds. I had not asked her to read it. Sutter looked at me. I nodded once. Elise's voice softened, but it did not shake. "Calvin, love makes us generous. It must not make us blind. If anyone ever asks you to choose between keeping peace and protecting what you built with honest hands, protect it. Peace built on a lie is not peace. It is just waiting." No one spoke. I looked at Ruth's handwriting from across the table. For a second, I was not in that conference room. I was in our kitchen on Sycamore Street, watching her cap a pen and tell me I hated paperwork because paper never sounded broken until too late. Then Brandon said, "That note has nothing to do with me." I looked at him. "It has everything to do with you." Sutter closed the ledger. "Brandon, you are directed to leave the premises." Brandon looked at Dennis. Dennis looked away. That was a small thing, but I saw it cut him. He had carried his parents' failed restaurant debt with my company's name, $486,000 of bad promise, and when the room turned, Dennis found the carpet interesting. Paula stood and gathered her tote. "We will contest all of this." Sutter said, "That is your right." Elise said, "Do not contact staff about company records." Paula looked at me. "After everything we did for Megan?" Megan answered before I could. "You used me." Paula's face hardened. "You're emotional." Megan said, "No, I'm awake." Brandon picked up his copy of the promotion letter. Elise held out her hand. "That stays." "It's mine. It's a company record." He hesitated, then he dropped it on the table. The sound was small, paper on laminate. Still, I heard the whole thing collapse inside it. Ray walked them to the lobby with Sutter beside him. Nobody touched anybody. Nobody needed to. The old rule in a shop is simple. When pressure is relieved the right way, there is no blast. Just the hiss of something dangerous losing power. Through the conference room glass, I watched Brandon stop at the empty wall where Ruth's bench used to be. He looked at it, then back at me. He knew then why it mattered. He had moved the wrong thing. When the front door closed behind them, the room stayed still. No one clapped. Good. This was not that kind of morning. Carla shut the laptop halfway. "Calvin, what do we tell payroll?" "Hold every payment tied to Brandon's authority." "All three?" "Yes." "The vehicle allowance too?" "Yes." She nodded. "That's $319,500 held." Elise looked at me. "Staff needs direction." I turned toward the supervisors along the wall. Men and women who had mortgages, bad knees, daughters in college, trucks that barely started in January. They did not need a speech. They needed the floor under them. I said, "Mercer Industrial opens Monday." Ray smiled a little. I said, "Apex gets finished today. Payroll runs clean. Nobody loses a job because Brandon used a title he did not have." One of the line leads asked, "Are you coming back, Calvin?" I looked at the ledger on the table. "I never left ownership," I said, "but I'm not here to sit in a glass office." That got a few breaths that almost became laughs. Elise asked, "Interim Operations Authority?" I looked at Ray. "You'll run floor schedules for 30 days. Ray blinked. "Me? You know the work. I'm not a president." Good. The room finally loosened. Carla said, "Bank wants the written confirmation before close. Sutter will send it." Sutter came back in then. "They're off the property." Good. He looked at Elise. "We need Brandon's office secured." Elise nodded. "Carla, access log. Ray, one witness." Ray said, "I'll bring Luis." I picked up the ledger. Megan watched me put it back in the canvas bag. She said, "Dad?" I waited. "I'm going home after this, not to him, to get my things." Sutter said, "Take someone." "I will." She looked at me. "Can I come back to Sycamore tonight?" "Yes." She swallowed. "It won't be forever." "It doesn't have to be forever. I need to figure out what I signed. We'll figure out what you do next." She nodded, and that was the only apology I needed from her in that room. Not because all was fixed. It was not. But she had stopped hiding behind his voice. That was the first good bolt in a weak frame. By 10:15, Brandon's glass office was open with Elise, Ray, Luis, Sutter, and me standing inside. The new executive desk still sat in pieces against the wall. His brass nameplate lay on top of it. Brandon Vale, President. Ray picked it up with 2 fingers. "Evidence?" Elise said, "Company property." Ray looked at me. "Storage?" I said, "Top shelf." He grinned. "Which one?" "The dusty one." Carla appeared at the door with printed access reports. "We found another vendor." Sutter turned. "Another one?" She handed him the pages. "MV Strategic Advisors, created last night at 9:42. Elise looked at me. "After he left here." Carla said, "Invoice not submitted yet. Draft only. $32,000. Sutter read the description. "Crisis management and ownership transition support." Ray shook his head. He was still building the bridge while it was burning. I looked at the half-painted walls, the new desk, the nameplate, and the taped box of Ruth's bench bolts that Brandon had left in the corner. "Print it," I said. Carla nodded. Sutter looked at me. "This goes to the lender too." "Yes." Elise opened a lower drawer in the file cabinet. "Calvin." Inside was a stack of envelopes. Each had a supervisor's name on it. Ray reached for his, then stopped and looked at Elise. She opened one with gloves from the evidence kit. Inside was a letter on Brandon's new letterhead. "Effective immediately, your role will be reviewed for alignment with the new leadership vision." Ray read over her shoulder. He was going to clean house. Luis said, "Friday afternoon?" Elise pulled another envelope. All dated Friday. I counted the stack. 9 envelopes, 9 families, 9 men and women who had kept my shop running while Brandon printed himself a crown. Megan stood in the doorway and saw them. She asked, "Were those firings?" Elise said, "Preliminary separation notices." Megan looked at me. "He told me nobody would get hurt." I looked at the envelopes. He lied. She walked away into the hall, one hand against the wall. I did not follow right away. Some truths need a minute alone with the person who finally sees them. Sutter put the letters into a folder. "This changes the employee communication." "How?" "We have to tell them their jobs were at risk." "Then tell them." Elise looked tired. "That will scare people." I thought of Brandon at the head of that table, saying he carried the place. I thought of 9 envelopes waiting like traps. "They were already in danger," I said. "They deserve to know who pulled the pin." Ray folded his arms. "Say it on the floor." Sutter gave him a look. Carefully. Ray looked back. "I said say it. I didn't say yell it." So we walked out to the shop floor before lunch. The lines were running again. Conveyor 3 sounded smooth. That new bearing purred the way a good part does when it is seated right. I stood beside it for a moment and listened. Ray came up next to me. "Sounds better." "Yes." "Funny where this started?" "No," I said. "Fitting." He nodded because he understood machines better than speeches. Elise gathered the supervisors near the tool crib. The rest of the floor kept working, but slowly. Everyone knew something had shifted. I kept it short. "Brandon Vale is no longer authorized to act for Mercer Industrial," I said. "Payments tied to him are frozen. No jobs are being cut today." A welder named Tom asked, "Were jobs going to be cut?" I looked at Elise. She said, "Separation drafts were found. They were not approved." Tom looked at me. "Who approved them?" "No one with authority," I said. That answer traveled across the floor. It did not make people happy. It made them steadier. There is a difference. Megan stood near the parts cage, watching men and women hear what Brandon had planned. Her face looked young and worn at the same time. When the meeting broke, she came to me. "I need to go to the house now." "Do you want me there?" She looked toward the lobby doors. "No," she said. "I need Ray and Elise." Ray looked surprised. Elise did not. Megan added, "If you come, I'll lean on you." That was the first strong thing she said all morning. I said, "Then go with them." She nodded and turned before she could change her mind. At the lobby wall, she stopped at the empty place again. "Dad," she said. "Yes?" "When I get back, can we put Mom's bench back?" I looked at the scuffed baseboard where Brandon had dragged it away. "Yes," I said. "We can." Ray drove Megan in the shop truck because his sedan still had brake dust all over the passenger seat. Elise sat beside her with a legal pad on her lap. I watched them pull out of Mercer Industrial's lot and turn toward Maple Terrace. Sutter stood beside me at the glass doors. "You want to follow?" "No." He looked over. "You sure?" She asked me not to. "That matters." "Yes," I said. "It does." Inside, Carla had already changed the payroll approvals. Her fingers moved fast, and the printer beside her kept coughing out paper. Brandon's login was disabled. His fuel card was locked. His company phone showed as remote wipe pending. That sounded cold when I say it that way, but every one of those things had been a door he left open. Carla held up a page. "Do you want a second approval on advances?" 3. She looked at me. "HR, finance, and ownership. Ownership means you. For now." She typed it in. "Dollar limit? Anything over 5,000. She nodded. That would have caught him. It will catch the next one. She stopped typing for half a second, then kept going. Sutter stepped into Brandon's office with 2 evidence boxes. The room looked smaller with him gone. Funny thing about a man who fills space with noise. Once the noise leaves, you see how little was really there. Ray called at 12:36. "We're at the house," he said. "How is she?" "Quiet." "Is Brandon there?" "No, Paula's car is gone too." I heard Megan's voice in the background. "Tell Dad I found the bank folder." Ray repeated it. "Is it company paper?" "Some is. Elise says we're bagging copies only." "Good." Ray lowered his voice. "Calvin, there's a suitcase in the hall." "Hers?" "Looks like it. Let her carry what she wants. She's taking Ruth's quilt." I closed my eyes for a second. Ruth had made that quilt when Megan was pregnant the first time, before the trouble, before the silence. I had not seen it in 2 years. "Good," I said. Ray was quiet. "What else?" He left a note on the kitchen counter. "What's it say?" Ray took a breath. "It says, 'Your father ruined us.'" I opened my eyes. "Leave it there." "You don't want it?" "No. That one belongs to him." At 1:15, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Lottie. She did not waste words. "Calvin, Brandon's in my back booth." "With who?" "Dennis and Paula. They're loud enough for the pie case." I looked toward Sutter. He saw my face change. Lottie said, "He's saying you tricked the company." "Is Megan there?" "No." "Good." Lottie lowered her voice. "You coming?" I looked at the ledger in the canvas bag. "Yes." Sutter drove. I took the bag because I was done leaving Ruth's words in rooms where Brandon had been. Mercer Industrial sat on the edge of Marrow Bend, close enough to Dayton that people said Dayton when they wanted to sound larger. Lottie's Diner sat on Sycamore, where people said Marrow Bend because everybody knew your truck. The lunch crowd had thinned, but not enough. A utility crew sat near the window. 2 nurses from the clinic had coffee at the counter. Old Marv Rusk was pretending not to listen from the stool closest to the pie case. Brandon was in the back booth with his sleeves rolled up. Paula had her tote open on the table. Dennis had both hands around a coffee mug and no coffee in it. Brandon saw me first. "You followed me?" "No." Lottie came from behind the counter. "He didn't have to. You brought the meeting here." Paula stiffened. "This is private." Lottie looked at the booth. "Then rent a room." Sutter touched my elbow. "Careful." "I am." I did not sit. Neither did Sutter. Brandon leaned back like the booth was a boardroom chair. "You happy now?" "No." "You froze my pay." "I froze company money." "My money." "Not today." Paula snapped her tote shut. "Dennis and I have obligations." Sutter said, "Your obligations are not Mercer's." Dennis looked at me then. He looked older than he had that morning. "Calvin, we can fix this." "How?" He swallowed. "Short extension. Maybe 90 days. "From who?" "The bank." Sutter took out his phone. Audrey Bell asked for a return call if Brandon contacted witnesses. Brandon sat forward. "Don't call her." "Why not?" I asked. "You've done enough." "No," I said. "You did enough." Sutter put the call on speaker right there beside Lottie's sugar dispenser. Audrey answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded the same as before. Flat, clean, professional. "This is Audrey Bell." Sutter gave his name and said where we were. He did not dress it up. He told her Brandon, Dennis, and Paula were present. He asked if she wanted the line recorded by bank counsel. "It already is," Audrey said. Brandon stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. Audrey said, "Mr. Vale, Miami Valley Commercial Credit has suspended reliance on all Mercer Industrial-related representations." Paula said, "We never misrepresented anything." Audrey waited 1 beat. "Mrs. Vale, the submitted packet included a president appointment letter and projected bonus assignments." Brandon said those were pending. Sutter said they were unauthorized. Audrey continued, "The bank will proceed against the Vale family hospitality guarantees and listed personal collateral." Dennis's grip tightened around the mug. "The house?" Paula turned toward him. "Dennis." Audrey said, "Your Maple Terrace property was listed by you as secondary collateral." Dennis shut his eyes. Brandon looked at his father. "You said it was just paperwork." Dennis opened his eyes slowly. "So did you." That landed harder than shouting. Paula pressed her lips together and stared out the window. The nurses at the counter stopped talking. Lottie picked up a rag and wiped the same clean spot twice. Brandon turned back to me. You could still sign. No. You could backdate approval. No. You're letting them take my parents' house. I'm not signing my company into your debt. His face tightened. Megan will sign. A voice behind me said, No, I won't. I turned. Megan stood just inside the diner door with Elise beside her. She held a canvas duffel in one hand and Ruth's quilt under her other arm. Ray stood behind them, wide enough to block the door without looking like he meant to. Brandon stood. Megan, come outside. No. This is between us. She walked toward the booth. You made it between everyone. Paula reached for her. Honey. Megan stepped back. Don't. Paula's hand stayed in the air, then dropped. Brandon looked at the quilt. You took that? It was my mother's. It was in our house. Megan's voice shook, but it held. I'm not going back there today. Brandon laughed once. It was ugly, because it was scared. Your dad got to you. Megan looked at the booth, then at the phone on the table. No, the bank folder did. Audrey said, Mrs. Vale, are you represented by counsel? Sutter said, Not yet. Megan looked at him. Can I be? Yes, Sutter said. Not by me for both you and the company, but I'll get you names. Brandon pointed at Sutter. You hear that? He's buying her a lawyer. I said, Lower your hand. He did. Maybe he hated that most. Megan laid a folded bank copy on the table. Elise had marked it with a sticky note. This is the signature page I saw, Megan said. This is the page above it. Audrey said, I'm listening. Megan's fingers pressed the paper flat. The top page says spouse acknowledgement. It doesn't say company support. Brandon said, You knew we needed help. I knew your parents' restaurant failed. Dennis flinched. Megan kept going. I didn't know you used Dad's company. I didn't know you called him unstable in an email. The diner went still. I looked at Brandon. You wrote that? Elise said, It was in the bank folder. Same packet. We copied it. Brandon's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Megan read from the page. Her voice was small, but everybody heard it. Calvin Mercer is increasingly confused and may require family oversight of business interests. Confused. There it was again, dragged into daylight. I had heard that word in my kitchen, in Megan's text, in Paula's soft little voice at Lottie's booth earlier that week. Now it sat on cheap diner laminate with coffee rings around it. I looked at Brandon. You couldn't hear a bearing fail from 10 feet away. He said nothing. You couldn't tell a real appointment letter from authority. Nothing. And you called me confused. Paula whispered, Calvin, please. I looked at her. No. Audrey said, Mrs. Vale, your statement and copies will be added to the file. Megan nodded at the phone like Audrey could see her. Brandon sat down hard. So that's it? Sutter said. For the bank? No. For today. Likely. Brandon looked around and saw faces he could not manage. Lottie, Marv, the utility crew, 2 nurses, his wife, his parents, me. There was no glass wall here, no nameplate, no assistant outside the door. He pushed out of the booth. Ray shifted 1 foot. Brandon stopped. I'm leaving, Brandon said. Ray said, then leave. Paula grabbed her tote. Dennis stood slower. None of them looked at Megan. That told me more than any apology would have. At the door, Brandon turned back. You said I was right about Friday. I nodded. He waited. I said, you were. By Friday, somebody got fired. His face twisted, but he had no room left to use it. Lottie opened the door before he touched it. He stepped into the July light with Dennis and Paula behind him, and the bell over the door rang like it always had. Nobody clapped in Lottie's either. Marrow Bend has manners about certain things. Megan sat down in the booth after they left. She put Ruth's quilt beside her and held both hands around a glass of water Lottie brought without asking. I'm sorry, she said. I sat across from her. For what? For believing him before I believed you. That was the only apology I let her give. All right. She looked up. That's it? For today. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. Can I stay at the house? Yes. I'll pay rent. No. Dad. Buy groceries, keep receipts, we'll talk after that. She nodded. It was not forgiveness wrapped up clean. It was a first board set straight enough to nail to. Sutter ended the call with Audrey and slid his phone away. Elise gathered the copies. Lottie came by with the check and laid it face down. I reached for it. She slapped my hand with the edge of her order pad. Not today. Lottie, Calvin. I let the check sit there. Back at Mercer Industrial, the afternoon shift was changing. Word had moved faster than Sutter liked and slower than Brandon deserved. That is about normal for a shop. Carla met us at the front desk. Approval matrix is live. Show me. She turned the monitor. Advances over $5,000 now required 3 separate approvals. Vendor creation needed finance review and HR acknowledgement. Any officer title change required owner certification attached before payroll saw it. Ray stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. Looks boring. Good, Carla said. She opened a drawer and took out the 9 envelopes from Brandon's office. Each one had been stamped void in red and logged with the date and time. Then she fed them into the scanner one by one, saved them to the protected file, and placed the originals in Sutter's box. Tom the welder came in with a timesheet. He saw his name on one envelope before the lid closed. That mine? I looked at him. It was. He nodded once. Thanks. I said, go home on time. He did. That was the one widening I will allow myself. Not a speech, not a plaque, just a red stamp, a locked file, and a man walking back to his job instead of out to the parking lot with a cardboard box. Near 4, Ray and Luis brought Ruth's bench from storage. Brandon had shoved it under a tarp beside old shelving and a broken pallet jack. The legs were scuffed. One bolt was missing. The brass plate was dull with shop dust. Ray held up the empty hole. I can find a match. I have the original. He looked at me. I took the small bolt from my shirt pocket. I had picked it up from Brandon's office that morning. It had been sitting in the corner of that taped box, mixed with washers like scrap. Luis carried the bench to the lobby wall. The spot looked worse empty than I remembered. 4 marks in the floor showed where the feet had been. A gray rub ran along the baseboard where Brandon had dragged it instead of lifting. Megan stood near the reception desk with Ruth's quilt folded in her arms. She watched me kneel, and for once she did not rush to help. I was glad. Some things a man needs to do with his own hands. Ray handed me the socket wrench. You good? Yes. The first bolt caught clean. The second needed pressure. The third went in crooked, so I backed it out and started again. You never force a thread unless you want trouble later. Megan came closer. Mom used to sit here. Every Friday she brought payroll cookies. I remember the oatmeal ones. She burned the first batch every time. Megan smiled, and it hurt to see how much I had missed that face. Elise stood by the door with Carla. Sutter waited near the hall. No one said we had work to do. We all knew it. I tightened the last bolt and tested the bench with both hands. It did not move. Ray gave me a clean rag. I wiped the brass plate until Ruth's name showed clear. Megan sat beside me without asking. The lobby smelled like oil, paper, and floor wax. Outside, the shop door opened and closed as the shift changed. I looked at the plate and said, I never swung at him. I just stopped carrying his weight. Then I set the wrench on Ruth's bench. The brass plate caught the lobby light.